can start the meeting.
We'll start, ma'am.
We should.
Yeah. So good evening, members. Request all of you to kindly rise for our institute's motto.
येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनाद्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैता 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 एतद्द्वैता.
So welcome, members. And today we have topic reassessment issues. And as you all are aware that we have received many notices between April 2021 and June 2021, and that notices were challenged in high courts. So we received a favorable judgment, and then again it was re-challenged in Supreme Court by the government authorities. And to clear all our doubts, we have our speaker today, KINJAL BHUTA. And without wasting any time, I request CA Ravi Soni to give a brief introduction of ours.
Thank you, Vipul Bhai. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, CA KINJAL BHUTA. CA KINJAL BHUTA is having work experience of 10 years plus in the field of direct and international taxation. She has her own firm and specializes in litigation and transfer pricing. She is managing committee member of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society and core group committee member of direct taxation and convener of seminar and member development of BCS. She has been author of various books like Tactical Guide to Faceless Assessment, appeal by Blossomberry Publication, Presumptive Taxation under Section 44 AD, ADA, 44 AE by BCS. She is a regular faculty on direct taxation in post-qualification course of ICI. Now with this brief introduction, we will provide I will share the screen of e-momento. And please consider this e-momento on behalf of BCSE, on behalf of BCSE.
Thank you.
Now,
should I proceed?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. I congratulate everyone to have this seminar because I think it's need of the hour. So there are too many controversies, whether we know anything more or less, but I think there are too many controversies which are there. And I think that is what I'm here for. I don't know whether I have answers or solutions to all the controversies because I think somehow even Supreme Court didn't have all the answers. So I'm no one in front of that. But I think one thing I assure that by the end of the session, I'll try to confuse everyone more. So that is something which can be done, because there are lots of issues which I have myself also taken. I'll try to leave, since we have good 3 hours, I'll leave considerable time towards the end for questions. I've tried to cover the most probable questions which everyone have. So I'll try, because since this is a topic and since it's a practical one, I'm sure that many would have questions. And I'll try to leave at least good amount of 20 minutes towards the end for the questions. But if you have something in between, you can definitely put up in the Q&A box, so that I can, if possible, I can interrupt and cover it if it is relevant at that point of time. So without wasting much time, I'll just share my screen. Yes, Lalit, is the screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay. So just a minute. What will I cover today? I think I've taken a very ambitious list of what I want to cover, but I'll ensure that I'll try to cover everything, at least from serial number 1 to 8. Landmark rulings is something which I've just kept, for the readers or for the participants of the study circle to read and have it as a reference point. But if I get some time, I'll try to cover that too. So the idea was to cover everything, the legislative provisions, the controversy, the issues in the erstwhile provision, in the new provision, and accepting the fact that now the new proceedings are something the way which you have to go. Then what are the future steps of how we are supposed to deal with that? That is the sum and substance of my entire presentation today. So no, it is very relevant for us. I think most of us would, since we were reading so many articles since 4th of May, which is the date when the Supreme Court judgment was out. I think most of us are aware about the basics, but yet I think the base of the entire litigation is the legislative provisions. And also the litigation which is there of the earlier years, which we would have before the CIT appeals now, would be under the older regime. So it's equally important to understand the old regime. It's only then we will understand the differences between the earlier one and the new one. So just certain glimpses on this particular slide, that what was the provisions of reassessments before 1st April 21. So 1st April 2021, when Finance Act was passed, the reassessment law has changed, a major change in the reassessment law. Section 147, Section 148, and Section 151. These 3 sections were totally replaced by new sections. And there was a new section which was introduced, which was 148A. Coming back to the earlier provisions, 147 was regarding income escaping assessment. So if there is any income, according to the assessing officer, which has escaped assessment, it was liable to be reopened. One of the most critical elements of the earlier reassessment proceedings was reason to believe. So I think we all know, because we have dealt with that in the past, the assessing officer had to record the reasons to believe that there was some escapement of income on account of assessee. So under the old provisions, we had 2 compartments, I would say. One was that specific reasons has to be brought about by the assessing officer. And second was deemed reasons, which means that there were certain categories. If you fall into that, like suppose non-filing of return of income or having foreign assets, if you have certain categories, then it will be deemed to be reason to believe. So, but reason to believe was very much necessary. And that was the crux of the reassessment proceedings in the past. Change of opinion was a very important concept, which was when there was already an original assessment done in case of an assessee. So if there was a 143.3 which was already done and the assessing officer wants to reopen that particular assessment, then it cannot be based on change of opinion. It has to be some fresh material. It has to be some material which is linked to the escapement of income. But if there is some material which was already given to the assessing officer, suppose if it is an expenditure which they want to disallow, and I have given all my expense details, my books of account, everything was given to the assessing officer in the original proceedings, then reassessment will not be valid because it will be just mere change of opinion. These concepts are important to be discussed right now, because these concepts we'll have to test whether they have any value in the new proceedings or not. So that was it. These were the two main issues. A lot of litigation and jurisprudence around these two phrases: reason to believe and change of opinion. Section 149, earlier section, had pronounced two limits, or rather three limits. We had 3 time limits of reassessing and assessment. One was 4 years, one was 6 years from the end of the year in which the return is of the assessment year, and 16 years. Now, what is the difference? 4 years was when 4 years was the bare minimum. That was the basic. For that, you did not have any monetary limit, and neither there was required any failure on the part of the assessee. So 4 years was a bare minimum limit. Then there was 6 years limit. So if there is beyond 4 years, then there were 2 conditions. One, there has to be some failure on the part of the assessee, or the assessee has purposefully hidden something or escaped something. So that recording has to be there in the reasons. And there was one pecuniary or monetary limit which was attached, which is that escaped income should be greater than rupees 1 lakh. So if both the conditions are fulfilled together, then they could reopen beyond 4 years up to 6 years. And 16 years was in case of foreign assets and any securities, etc., interest in foreign countries. So these were the 3 limits which we have now. These 3 limits have been, as we know, which have been replaced. So I'll come to the newer provisions in the later slides. Sanction was required under section 151. Sanction is still required under 151. However, the authorities under the old provision and authorities under the new provision are different. So that is the only thing which we take away right now. There is no point into getting into the sanction authorities in the older provision. They were PCITs and JCITs. So sanction was different for 4 years and sanction authorities were different for 6 years. But sanction was a prerequisite. That means it was a pre-requirement before issuing notice under section 148. Reasons were to be recorded. This was a mandatory requirement of recording of reasons. So if we say the entire procedure, GVK drive shaft was the judgment which had GK and drive shaft was the Supreme Court judgment which laid down the entire procedure of how reassessment has to be done. So under the erstwhile provisions, it was first recording of reasons based on obviously some information, some tangible material by the assessing officer. Once the reasons have been recorded, the reasons had to be given to the PCIT or the relevant authority under 151, and a sanction was required. Objective sanction has to be given by the relevant authority, and there was notice under section 148 which was issued to the assessee before the time limits which are set in, and of this 4 years and 6 years. And once the 148 notice has been issued, the assessee has to file a return in pursuance to that and call for reasons recorded. The later steps were that one has to object the reasons which have been recorded. Pursuant to those objections received, the assessing officer has to pass a disposal order. And once that disposal order is there, the assessing officer has to wait for 4 weeks if the assessee wants to go to High Court or challenge the order. So it has to wait for 4 weeks. And after that, a questionnaire could be issued and the assessment could have been started. So this was the procedure which was laid down by Supreme Court and followed over the years. There was a lot of litigation around. If either of one of the step is also missing in this, then it was a litigative issue. And in what has been come in the new provisions is nothing but the intention was to replicate the Supreme Court decision and bring it in the act itself. And when we discuss the new sections, we will be able to see certain glimpses of Supreme Court decision where they have provided certain checks and balances at various places to see to it that proper opportunity is given to the assessee. Another thing, which was one explanation to section 147, which clarified that the assessing officer can tax any other income which subsequently comes to the notice of the AO. So in case if they are, for an example, if they are issuing you notice for difference in the stamp duty value under section 50C, if they are issuing you a notice for reasons, and after that, if they feel that there are certain expenses which are personal expenses which have been claimed, then they can do both. They can make an addition under 50C and they can also make an addition on account of personal expenses, though it was not part of your reasons recorded. But that was provided in the section 147 itself and also in explanation 3. So this is when it comes to the earlier reassessment proceedings. I earlier mentioned that there were deemed cases of escaped assessment. Right now, under the new provisions also, we have deemed cases. But what were the deemed cases in the earlier proceedings? Were that first, there was no return of income which has been filed. When return is filed, but assessee has underreported the income or claimed an additional loss, or when the report under 92E, which is if there is a transfer pricing case or if there is any international transactions involved, then in that case, if a report is not being furnished, then it itself is equivalent to escapement of income. Whenever there was any investigation or any action which was taken under section 133C and any information is received based on that, then itself it was considered as a deemed case. And if you had any financial interest or assets outside India. So in those cases, it was deemed that escapement was there. Reasons were still required, but this was an enough reason for them to reopen the assessment. So this is when it comes now coming to what are the major changes in the new reassessment regime. So we all know it is applicable from 1st April 21. So ideally all those notices which are issued from 1st April 21 should be following the new reassessment regime. And since the AO had not followed the new reassessment regime, that was the entire controversy, which we will come to at the second or the later part of the session. Time limits have been changed from 4 to 6 years. It has now been replaced to 3 to 10 years. 16 years is no more present. So the higher limit is 10 years. The lower limit is 3 years. And I still remember while bringing these provisions, I remember the speech of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, she telling that we want to, probably reduce the litigation which is there under the reassessment proceedings. We want to bring certainty to the business and we want to bring certain ease of doing business. And that is why we are reducing the time limit to 3 years. 10 years was something which was not spoken by her. That is something which, as we say that devils are in the details. So that is what we came later on. And I think another 1 decade will tell us that whether there are litigations which have reduced or increased out of this new provisions. So time will say that, but this was the intention. The intention was to reduce the time limits and reduce the harassment on account of reopening. Assessment. This is one of the most, I think, critical amendment which has been made is that the search and seizure assessments are coming under the purview of reassessments. So section 153A to section 153D are now operational only up to 31st March 2021. After that, it will fall under the reassessment regime. So now any search and seizure which is conducted after 1st April 21 will have to follow the new provisions. The earlier provisions of 153A, B, C, and D will not fall into place. This is relevant. So all, in the past, there were lots of decisions, lots of good jurisprudence wherein a comparison was made between reassessment proceedings and search and seizure proceedings. There were a lot of principles which were more or less same, and that is why there used to be a lot of decisions distinguishing the two proceedings, and there were a lot of decisions which were also drawing a common link between the proceedings. I would say now all those decisions are redundant with this provision coming into picture. They have accepted the fact that search and seizure is nothing but reassessment proceedings only, and that is why it has been brought. For simplicity's sake, there is only one range of sections made available for search and seizure provisions. With this, we also have to understand that the earlier block assessment, famously as we used to call that, it used to be for 7 years, that also stands to be removed. So now it will be, the search and seizure could be for 3 years, it could also be for 10 years. So that is something which one has to consider. It could be for each of the years where they feel which we are falling in the time limits, could be reopened under the search and seizure. So now that standard 7 years limit is not going to survive. The earlier provisions had reasons to believe. The current provisions have replaced reasons to believe with information. The memorandum provided that the entire reason of bringing it or changing the wordings from reasons to reopening to information was that they wanted to get rid of the subjectivity of the assessing officer who is recording the reason to be believed. And that is why they wanted to rely on some risk management strategy, which we are not aware as of now, but some risk assessment strategy, which is completely computerized, which has some formulas and some information which is uploaded based on the parameters which is going to be laid down by the CBDT, and based on that information the reopening has to happen. So the subjectivity of the assessing officer of applying his mind towards the information or towards the any tangible material in his hand, that they wanted to get done away with, and that is why reason to believe is now replaced with information. They also realized that there are lots of litigation, lots of decisions which have been pending on reason to believe. Many cases have been held in favor of the assessee, which says that there was no reason, there was no objective reason. The assessing officer failed to prove that why there is escapement. So that is the reason probably they wanted to move on to a more objective manner. Incorporation of Section 148A is a major amendment. As I mentioned that they wanted to incorporate the learnings or the giveaways of GK and Drive Shaft to the text of income tax itself, and that is the reason why they brought about Section 148A into place, to see that those kind of opportunities are given at various stages to the assessee before an actual reopening is happening. Now we start the relevant legislative provisions. Whether every one of you are versed or unversed with the new provisions, I think a study of these provisions is extremely mandatory for understanding what is the controversy of Supreme Court, and at the same time leaving whatever is the controversy to understand that how do we as an assessee deal with the new reopenings. So this is something which I thought that I want to take clause by clause. So coming to Section 147, I've highlighted the relevant aspects or underlined them. So because those have special relevance in the section. Any income which is chargeable to tax and has escaped assessment, subject to Section 148 and 153. So this provision is subject to 148 to 153, which is the procedural part of the reopening provisions. Reassess such income. Such income means escaped income or any, just a minute. Yes. Or any such income which can be recomputed, want to compute the loss, depreciation, allowance or deduction. And explanation, there is, as I mentioned, that there was an explanation under 147, wherein they had mentioned that any subsequent issue can come into picture. The same they have also added here, that any subsequent issue which comes to the notice of AO even though section 148A is not complied with. To that extent, they are giving that powers to the assessing officer to make any additional addition, even if it is not a part of that information which they are talking about, that also can be added. So that is when it comes to section 147, more or less section 147 is same. Earlier, we had lots of provisions in section 147 that what if in case there is a regular assessment which has been done, then how they are supposed to, they have to do only on the additional or only on the tangible information which was available. So all those provisions which were there under the earlier provisions have now been removed. The section is very small and brief, and according to me, it has enlarged the scope because it includes all kind of information, all kind of income which has been escaped under the information which they have, and even additionally which they find in the process of reassessment proceedings. Coming to section 148. 148 is now subject to 148A because 148A is should be preceding 148, because that is the section wherein show cause notices are issued and the disposal orders are made. It says AO shall serve the notice. So service is very important. That was there earlier too. Why I'm highlighting here is that only issuance is not relevant. One also has to serve the notices, and once the notices have been served, only then the reassessments can happen. However, we have plethora of case laws that if the assessee, if the notice has not been served, but the assessee is participating in the assessment proceedings, then in that case, one cannot question that the service was not done at a later stage. So if at all the notices, because I have seen there are multiple cases where the notices have not been served to the assessee, they have been either they have not been uploaded in the earlier times also, in last when the website was not working properly. At that time also the service used to happen quite late. They used to send notices by way of speed post, and the notices were not uploaded on time on the portal. In all those issues, because there are lots of issues which are emerging because of issuance and because of service of notice. I even narrate one example when we discuss the issues, some practical examples, what has happened with us and how to deal with those. But service is something which is important at this stage. So if AO shall serve with that order, and if required, under section 148D to file the return of income. So there is a notice which is to be given. Now the first proviso of section 148 says that no notice will be issued unless there is some information on record. So there has to be some information, and there has to be some escapement, and there has to be approval. So these are the three conditions mentioned in the first proviso. I would like to clarify on the sake of repetitiveness that all three conditions are relevant and they have to be existing together. It should coexist. One is there is information. Second, because of that information, there is some escapement. And third, there is approval or a sanction taken from the relevant authority. Either of this it is missing, then it is a jurisdictional issue and it is something which is beyond the scope or void in law. So why this is relevant is this would be the major point of arguing or debating when we reply to the show cause notices which are issued under 148A, because whatever notices we have received so far, I think 90% of the notices are based on the information which is updated on the inside portal. In many notices we have seen that they provide the information, but how that information is related to escapement of income is completely missing from the from that particular notice. And I think that is something which is very much relevant to contest at that stage itself. To point it out when we object that particular notice, it is relevant to point out that there has to be escapement also. Only having information is not sufficient. Second proviso says that no approval required for issuing a notice under section 148 if the same is taken at 148A(d) stage. Now, wherever I have in the entire presentation, wherever I've kept in bold, that means that is a new provision added by Finance Act 22. So this second proviso was entered into by Finance Act 22 with effect from 1st April 22. What does it say? 148A(d) is nothing but like a disposal order. So if there is a disposal order which is made, and if there is an approval which is taken at the disposal stage, then at the stage of issuing notice under 148, you don't require any approval. This is what the second proviso says. However, this provision is applicable only from 1st April 22. So if you have received any notice up till 31st March 22, and if the notice under 148 does not have any sanction or does not have any approval, there is this one mandatory line which they write that, approval from PCIT or from PCCIT as required under section 151 is taken. So that has to be there in the notice under 148, but only up to 31st March 22. After that, the second proviso says that such approval is not required. Now, coming to section 148, I have, tried to bifurcate that into bits and parts, because that is the entire crux of the proceedings to be happening in future. What is information? Information means, this is an explanation which is given. Information means information with the AO that suggests that income has escaped assessment. So your suggestion and escapement assessment are relevant, where any information flagged in accordance with risk management strategy formulated by board from time to time. Flagged word is deleted with effect from 1st April 22. So that that has been changed by the Finance Act 22, and that is why I have just put a strike through. So now flagging of information is not required. Any information is fine in accordance with risk management strategy. Now the ironical part is, I tried to search and ask and research many people, but I think no one has an answer. What is risk management strategy? If anyone from the participants will have, I will like to know that. But I have tried to, search that if we could get some kind of rationale that what is this risk management strategy. I think it would be safe to say that there is no strategy which is formulated up till now. Although the notices have been started taking up, now this could be taken up as an issue. It is a very technical thing. It will go to the base of jurisdiction of the issuance of notices. But this is true that there is no risk management strategy publicly available at any of the forums. If there is some internal instruction, then I'm not aware of. There is some CBD instruction, which I have made part of this particular presentation, but there is no strategy which has been notified by way of a press release or a circular or instructions. Second is any objection, audit objection which is raised. Earlier we had the word CAG, now they have been removed. This also enhances the scope. So now they say that, any audit objection which is there that affects the assessment, then and if it suggests that, the assessment has not been made as per the provisions of the Act, then it construes as information. Any information received under the DTAA agreements and tax treaties, and any information which is available as per the verification under 135A. So there was this faceless collection of information on e-verification scheme which was introduced in 2021, wherein prior to reassessment, there used to happen verification. So I think some of the clients have started receiving notices under section 135A for verification of information. So if any information is given by the assessee themselves under 135A, then based on that information, they can do a reopening. And any information which requires action in consequence of order of ITAT or any other court. So if there is something which has happened for the assessee or on some issue wherein there is any information which is in receipt in the possession of the assessing officer based on some subsequent order or some court, then based on that they can bring into the reassessment provisions. Again, like we had in the earlier provisions, we have it here too. We have deeming provisions. So there we had deeming provisions for escapement. Here we have what is called as deemed information. So these provisions are restricted to basically search and seizure proceedings. So if there is any search, then you don't need information. That means if there is a survey which is conducted under section 133A, other than under 2A or subsection 5. So subsection 5 is now deleted. That is why I've put these survey proceedings were 2A and 5 were regarding any information or any detail which was available by summoning a person in person if there is any statement which has been recorded, but now they have removed. By removal of subsection 5, they have done nothing but enhance the scope of this section. When AO is satisfied that there is any money or bullion, jewelry or any article which is seized belongs to the assessee. There's a lot of controversy in the past in search and seizure proceedings on the word belongs. So those can be used here too. If the AO is satisfied that any books of accounts or documents which are seized are pertaining or relating to the assessee. So if this is, so basically as we can see, in case of search and seizure or survey assessments, there is no requirement of having such information. Those will be deemed and there will be reassessments for those particular cases. For 3 assessment years immediately preceding the assessment year relevant to previous year. Now, this is relevant. This amendment has been made in Finance Act 22, which has removed the provisions 3 assessment years. So earlier, by reading the provisions, we thought that for search and seizure actions, 3 years they will reopen because this provision was there. Now they have removed and they have not replaced with any other time limit or any other assessment years. So that will, one can sufficiently conclude that it can be opened for any number of years, provided it is within the time limit of section 149. So if within the section 149, if there are 10 years also, not right now, because right now we have the proviso of 149 which protects the assessee. But later on, by 2025 or 2026, there will be 10 years which can be reopened. So it could happen that search and seizure proceedings for 10 years could be reopened because they don't require any information for that. So this is one very, enhancing scope by way of Finance Act 22. And this has been brought about with retrospective effect from 1st April 21, which is right from when the provision was introduced in the Income Tax Act. And explanation 3 of the section says that specified authority means an authority under section 141. Now coming to the most litigative section right now, section 148A. This is a new section. There are 4 subclauses A, B, C, and D. 148A says that before reassessment, before issuing any notices, the assessing officer can conduct an inquiry with prior approval if required. So this provision, subclause A, is not a mandatory provision. It's an optional provision. If the assessing officer feels that there is any requirement for having such inquiry, then they can do under subclause A. B says, now clause B is a mandatory clause. That is nothing but a show cause notice. To assessing officer has to provide an opportunity to the assessee and serve a show cause notice with prior approval. Prior approval is removed with effect from 1st April 22. So now no prior approval is required under 148A-B because it is just a show cause notice. It is not, they realized, because again litigation started. Wherever they are not going to do anything which is required as per law, people are going to contest and going to move to High Court for writ petition. And they realized that prior approval was there at many stages. At the stage of show cause notice, at the stage of inquiry, even at the stage of 148AD, even at the stage of issuance of notice under 148. So they tried to remove so many checks, and that is why now no prior approval is required. There's a time limit which is given to protect the interest of the assessee, giving time not less than 7 days, but not more than 30 days. Now, when they say not less than 7 days and not more than 30 days, this is a silver lining or an opportunity to the assessee to definitely ask for an adjournment if 7 days are not enough. So these deadlines are very important. They were not there in the earlier provisions, and I think this is something which is definitely favoring the assessee. So this is considered, should be taken as an opportunity. Since there is an upper limit given to it, that means that they are open to give adjournments or open to give time. And that is why if you feel that the details or the information gathering, because there are 10 years involved now. So the information which is of more than some 7 years or 8 years, it's difficult to obtain that kind of an information. And that is why the assessee can very well ask for time from the date of issue with the results of inquiry. So if there is an inquiry which is conducted under subclause A, then they have to give the show cause notice along with a report of the inquiry. And they have specified that adjournment can be made at this stage. Subclause C. This is also a very one-liner clause, but I think one of the most important clauses out of A to D, which says the assessing officer has to consider the reply furnished by the assessee. Now, why this is important? If we remember, in none of the provisions in the earlier reassessment proceedings, or if we recall even in the many other procedural proceedings, there is nowhere a specific subclause which says that the AO has to consider the details. Now, come on, we all understand that this is common logic. If I have filed certain information, they have to consider it. There is no clause which is required for that. But what we had seen in the past is that the assessing officer, while passing the disposal order, was not even looking at whatever reply has been filed. It was just a customary disposal order because they were with a preconceived notion that we want to do the reassessment. And this is just a formality of Supreme Court, and that is why I have to dispose. That was the only thing which was there in their mind. And that is the reason it was done in a very cursory manner. Now, they have put it into the subclause that they have to consider a reply and then they have to issue a order regarding that. And there are two very latest judgments of High Court I have taken up in the later slides, that is on this subclause only. And lastly, D, which says that the assessing officer has to decide on the basis of material on record, including the reply of the assessee, whether it is a fit case to reopen or not with prior approval. Now, there are too many things which one has to see and read between the lines here. First, it says, this ensures, why I'm trying to mince and quote each and every word of these provisions is to make everyone understand and realize that the provisions are really favorable to the assessee if they are executed properly. If they are executed correctly in full faith, then they are definitely in favor of assessee. It says that not only the reply of the assessee, but the assessing officer also has to decide on the basis of material on record. So if suppose after the issuance of notice, there is some material which is available on record, and if there is any reply which is filed by the assessee, then considering both the things together, they have to pass an order. So that means, there is a myth, or there is one thing which has come to everyone's mind, that since reason to believe has now been removed under the new provisions, some of the professionals I have heard, they say that now that means only information is relevant. There is no requirement of application of mind. Because reason to believe, always we used to make one ground that, there has to be some application of mind. According to me, by putting that they have to make a reply based on the material on record, application of mind is required even at this stage. The assessing officer will have to see to it that there is some escapement based on whatever information they have and with whatever reply which has been received. Considering that assessee has not even replied, in that case also they have to make an objective order and they have to conclude that it is a fit case to reopen, and with the prior approval within 1 month from the end of the month of reply received. So here also they have kept, this is the first time in reassessment proceedings where they are giving so many dates, 7 days, 30 days, again 30 days. So again a month here. So it says they have to wait for 30 days. So from the date of reply received, that means that once the reply received, it's not that I immediately pass a disposal order. The only reason for giving 30 days is to have an objective order, so that the assessing officer is not completing the assessment in a very hasty manner and putting his mind or her mind into the reply which is filed and then filing an order. Or when 1 month expires from the time limit which is given to the assessee. So 1 month is something which is very basic. So according to me, so far 148A provisions are basically pro-assessee provisions. Unfortunately and ironically, there have been litigation because of these provisions, but yes, they are definitely favorable. Exceptions. Now, in which cases, again, these are the cases which are related to search, seizure and survey. So I'll not waste too much time. These are the exceptions. So if it is search proceedings or survey proceedings, in that case, no show cause notice is required. So that is something which one has to see to it. The only thing here which I would like to highlight, which I've taken it as an issue, is that because of these exceptions, all the search proceedings, whether it is in case of an assessee under 153A, which was in earlier provision, which means a person on whose premises the search is conducted, or any other person whose information was available or connected. There used to be assessments under 153C of related parties of the search authorities. There was requirement of sanction, there was requirement of satisfaction for doing for a third person or a related entity. So that is not here. So that I will discuss in the issues, but just pointing it out here in the exceptions. When AO has received any information under scheme of section 135A. Now this exception is quite dangerous. 135 is a new section which is for verification, and this is with effect from 1st April 22, new provision which has been entered. So if there is any information which is received under that scheme, then no show cause notice is required. You can straight away issue notice under 148. And under 148B, that is a different section which has been introduced specifically for search and seizure cases, that any order has to be passed by AO being JCIT or above and approval. So there is a different sanction which is required in search and seizure cases. For that, you have to refer to 148B and not 151. Section 149. Again, a very interesting section to understand the controversy which we have, which we will discuss. So now section 149 is the time limit for issuance of notice. As I mentioned earlier, we had 4 and 6. Now we have 3 and 10. So 3 years from the end of the relevant assessment year. That is the blanket limit, basic limit with no conditions attached. And the second is 10 years. If assessing officer has in the possession books of account or documents or evidences. Evidences has not been very much used in Income Tax Act. Evidence is nowhere defined also. It is defined under Indian Evidence Act, but it is nowhere defined under the Income Tax Act. And normally whatever provisions which we have seen when it was earlier in reassessment or search and seizure, or even the unaccounted income provisions of 68, 69, everywhere it was books of accounts. This is, I think, one of the first time where I've seen where they have put evidences. The reason or rationale is something which I'm not aware of, but just putting it across since I noticed that, which reveal that income chargeable to tax is represented So there has to be chargeable income, okay, not any income. If there is some asset and there is some agricultural income, some sale of agricultural land, then it is not a chargeable income. And in that case, even if it is related to an asset or a land, it will not be falling part of this particular provision. So it has to be necessarily an income which is chargeable to tax, represented in form of an asset, expenditure for transaction, event or occasion. Again, this is first time which is being used, event or occasion. We don't know what is event or occasion here. But I foresee that, this would cover even the personal expenses. That is what I would, transaction is with respect to the business. But when it comes to event or occasion, it might be certain personal events or occasions too. An entry in the books of account. Now this subclause Roman 2 and Roman 3 are introduced with Finance Act 22 with effect from 1st April 22. So here, this is what is relevant to take away from here is that these two provisions which have enlarged the scope of the section are applicable only from 1st April 22. So if you have received any notice before that, then it has to be 10 years only with respect to asset. If they have added something for your expenditure or for any entry, purchase or some other transaction, then it is not relevant. So just for that 1 year, we'll have to remember that the starting 1 year is only for asset and later on it is for expenditure. Now, what worries me more is the subclause 3, which says an entry in books of account. Now, what do you mean by entry in books of account? Because that is, the irony here is that though they have added a specific provision, the provision is so generic that it doesn't look like it is a specific provision. Because entry in books of account means it's unfettered powers to the assessing officer. It enlarges the scope and it kills the purpose of the new reassessment provisions. The entire intention, as we were told by the finance minister, or as it was written in the, the objects clause or the memorandum which was issued by the Finance Act, that they want to reduce litigation, they want to have ease of business. What is this entry in books of accounts? Because that means each and every entry they can challenge, because they have not clarified what is this entry. And I think if they want to reduce the scope of litigation, there has to be some explanation which has to be added to this section, which explains what do you mean by an entry in the books of account. So these three, which is escaped assessment, amounts or is likely to amount to rupees 50 lakhs or more. So 10 years is only when it is 50 lakhs or more. What is 50 lakhs or more? The escaped amount. Okay, it says the escaped amount. It does not say any information which you receive. Now, what is that? I will come to the issues. I want to discuss that at large. What is interesting here is the word is likely. Now, I don't know whether, they have just written the law very casually with due respect to the lawmakers. But what does one interpret when you write the amount or is likely to amount 50 lakhs? Now, when there is a limit which has been given, what do you mean by is likely? Does it mean that if it is 49 lakhs, it is likely to amount to 50 lakhs? That means that there is escapement. Frankly speaking, I don't have an answer to that, but the provisions are a little vague here. And that is the reason why I highlighted here. One of the reasons which comes to my mind is that they also open this thing to future litigation. Some may say that, how did the assessing officer know? Suppose if there is any, purchase of property. I'll give you an example. Purchase of immovable property. Property purchased of about 2 crores. Now the evidence, the assessee has not filed a return of income. This is a very practical example which is happening these days. The assessee is a non-resident. Assessee has purchased a property and not filed because he was not required to file return in India and received a notice of escapement. Happened in multiple clients of mine. Now, in that case, what they do is in the information, they write entire 2 crores property, the purchase value as escapement amount, because they don't know They just have received information. But does that information mean that the entire 2 crores, of the source of which they want to justify, that entire amount is the escaped amount? That is something which assessing officer will also not know. And that is, to guard that, probably they have brought this word is likely. That is what is my understanding, but it could be open to any particular interpretation. What is an asset has been explained. What is an expenditure or entry has not been explained, but asset is explained. Asset means any immovable property, shares, securities, loans, advances, and deposits in bank account. Now, this is very relevant. Deposits in bank account. Again, in non-resident assessees, huge deposits in NRE accounts, deposits or loans received from resident parties, or all of these things are going to come under the assets. So that is just some of the practical, issues which have come up. Provisions to Section 149. 4 provisos to Section 149. Again, extremely critical provisos. So first one says, and this we'll have to read this provision very well, because this is something which is going to give answers to most of our questions. That no notice to be issued if the same could not have been issued, being time barred as on 1st April 21 as per the erstwhile time limits. Erstwhile time limits means as per the earlier Section 149. Earlier Section 149 was 4 years and 6 years. So if there is any notice which was already time barred as per 4 years and 6 years provision, then those time barred notices cannot be opened under the new provisions. These are grandfathering provisions. Just as we had for capital gains, same way they have grandfathered these provisions to protect the interest of the assessee. And this is indeed a provision which protects the assessee. Second proviso says that the section is not applicable if the search is initiated before 31st March. That is fine. Third is, for limitation period, the time for which the proceedings are stayed by a court order or injunction shall be excluded. Now, this is also relevant because now we have seen that most of these notices are challenged at the High Court by way of writ petition. So whatever timing which was involved in this litigation before the High Court, where there is a stay order, where there is an injunction order, that entire time limit will be excluded. These provisions we have found that taking place in various places in the Income Tax Act, where they remove that much period. And the fourth proviso says that the period to pass order under 148D, which is the disposal order, if after giving effect to the provision, shall be extended to 7 days, if lesser than that. So if there is, after giving effect to this third proviso, if there are only 3 days left, or if there are only 2 days left, then they will extend it to 7 days so that the assessee gets at least 7 days to response, even after the matter has, because in various cases we have seen that High Court there are cases where High Court listens to the assessee. There are various cases where the matters have been dismissed on technical grounds. So when it comes back to the assessing officer, minimum 7 days period will be given. And Section 149(1)(a), that is another section. This is also one very critical enhancement of scope of Section 149 or 148. The limit of 50 lakhs is cumulative for all the years of assets and expenditure. This is with effect from 1st April 22. So again, for that 1 year, this provision is not going to apply. But for all, so now we are already in May, 1 month past April. So now if you receive any notice, the 50 lakh limit is not for 1 year. It is for cumulative of all years for that particular asset or expenditure. So this means that they can reopen 3 years. They can put together the limit of 50 lakhs for all 3 years, and they can reopen all 3 years also. Obviously, it should fall within the time limits of 149, but they can do so. Sanction under Section 151. For 3 years or less, we have PCIT or PDIT or CIT or DIT. For more than 3 years, we have Principal Chief Commissioner and Principal Director General of Income Tax and CCIT or DGIT. So yes, sanction is something which is extremely relevant to the jurisdiction of the notices issued. We have seen lots of cases filed before various courts for lack of sanction. When it comes to sanction, there are plethora of judgments which says that objective sanction is to be given. Only writing that I construe or I held this as a fit case for reopening is not something which is required. Something beyond that is required. Objective sanction is required. Objective satisfaction is required. And hence, it becomes extremely important for all of us to ask for sanction at the stage of notice itself. So suppose if there is any notice which has been received under 148 A or 148, the main 148 section, in that case, the sanction has to be asked from the assessing officer. They normally write it in the notice, but on asking of the assessee, they will give you the sanction. And based on the sanction, you will, two things which you will have to see, whether the authority is the correct authority or not. And second, the date of the sanction, because sanction is something which is a prerequisite. It is a preceding provision. So it is a conditional provision, and that is why the date is very important of the sanction. And lastly, section 151A, which is the end of the reassessment provisions, which is faceless assessments of income escaping assessments. Now, these provisions, faceless assessments of income escaping assessments, was brought about by TOLA in 2020. Like there are faceless provisions under 144B. Similarly, a new section was inserted, section 151A, and this section had a sunset clause which said that they have to bring up a scheme of faceless reassessment before 31st March 22. So there was a scheme which was issued, I guess somewhere in January or March, either of the months. There was a one-page scheme, faceless reassessment scheme, which was introduced, and that one-page scheme gives entire powers of conducting faceless assessments to section 144B, which is the faceless assessment provisions. Also, if one reads section 144B, which is the faceless provisions, there has been an amendment. The entire section 144B is now replaced with the Finance Act 22, and now in the first clause of the section itself, they have included reopening provisions also. So that is the reason why we see that from the show cause notice stage till the disposal order stage, it is the jurisdictional assessing officer issuing the notice, and it is the jurisdictional assessing officer whose name is written and whose digital signature is there and who is passing the order. As soon as that disposal is done and the time period is gone, the notice under 148 is issued by the faceless authorities. That is how it is happening, and that is how it is going to happen, because they have not brought about any full codified faceless provisions for reassessment. They have given the powers to the normal procedures. Yes. So now validity of notices which has been issued, and what is the controversy? This is the famous Supreme Court decision which I have been referring to, and this will also resolve a lot of questions which we have in mind. I wanted to sequentially point out that what has happened in the past, so that we understand that what is going to happen in future. So there was an ordinance, as we all know, COVID struck in late March, and for assessment year 13-14, 6 years were expiring on 31st March 2020. So now, since COVID struck in, they extended the time limits, and they extended the 31st March 20 limit to 30th June. Since it was getting time barred on 31st March and COVID struck in, and they had to do it. Now this deadline got multiple time, it got extended. So there were various notifications from 30th June 2020 to it came to 31st December 2020. From 31st December 2020, it came to 31st March 21. Now, when we are at 31st March 21, there were 2 time limits which were expiring. One was assessment year 13-14, because that was already expired in 31st March 20. But because of this extensions, it got carried forward to 31st March 21. And the original limit for assessment year 14-15. Now the limit which I am telling here is the 6 years limit as per the earlier provisions, because remember at this juncture, the new law was not passed. The new reassessment law came only with effect from 1st April 21. So before that, assessment year 13-14 and assessment year 14-15, both were time barred as on 31st March 21. However, before they could get time barred, there was further 2 things happened together. One is TOLA came, and TOLA is the Relaxation and Amendment Act of 2022. It is just an acronym which is used. So TOLA Act was introduced, which extended 31st March 21 to 30th April 21. Now on the same day, what happened is that with effect, Finance Act 21 was also coming into picture, and that also brought the new provisions with effect from 1st April 21. So both the things happened together, the TOLA extension and the Finance Act new provisions. Notification number 20 was there, which further extended this 30th April to 30th June 21. This was the last of the chain of extensions which were brought about. So that was the last extension of 30th June. Now, one thing one has to consider, and at this stage, when we are discussing the dates or the sequence of events, is that the notification number 20 of 2021, which extended, the deadline to 30th June, that notification came after the Finance Act 21 was passed. So this notification extended the due date of the older provisions already when the new provisions were in place. Now, whether they can do that, whether a notification can do that or not do that, that was the entire subject matter and debate of all the cases before High Court. That because notifications are issued by Cbd and Finance Act is passed by both the houses of Parliament and gets an accent, so it is a law. Notification and circular is not a law. It is just the guidance. It is just a delegated legislation. The Income Tax Act is the primary legislation. So notifications, circulars, instructions, all of these are basically supporting the Income Tax Act. They are not the act in its own. And that is why the question before all the authorities or all the High Court judges was that when already Income Tax Act had replaced the reassessment law, how can a notification override the Finance Act and extend the time limit of an earlier provision? Can a notification do that? Can a notification override the Finance Act? The answer is no, they cannot do that. And that is also something which Supreme Court has also given in its order. So we'll come to that when we discuss the Supreme Court decision. So this is what happened. Section 3 of, if one wants to, study that what were the amendments or what were the things which were crucial before the High Court, was Section 3 of TOLA, which made the amendments, and explanation to notification number 20, which was challenged as unconstitutional. The reason of being unconstitutional was that only, that a delegated legislature cannot override the principal legislature. This is a normal rule of law. So they cannot do that. And which mentioned that all procedures to apply to notices issued in an extended period. The entire controversy was only for a limited period, the period from 1st April 21 to 30th June 21. Whether, so in one line, if I can explain the controversy, that all those notices which were issued from April 21 to June 21, whether old law will apply or whether new law will apply. Because new law was already brought into picture, and old law because the notification amended and extended the old law. So whether the old law or the new law, that is the only question which was there. And that was the limited issue which was there before all the high courts. Although very technical and very easy to say that it is a limited issue, but that, that propagated almost 90,000 notices and 9,000 cases before the High Court. Now, decision before various High Courts. So various High Courts give different decisions. The first very decision which came was Chhattisgarh High Court. In fact, interestingly, the first High Court before which the notices were challenged was Bombay High Court. In case of Armada, even in Tata Communication Service, although conversely, Bombay High Court was the last one to give a verdict on. But the first High Court which saw the writ petition against 148 was Bombay High Court. The first one to give a decision on this was Chhattisgarh High Court, and Chhattisgarh High Court was in favor of revenue. It says that notices are very much valid and doctrine of conditional legislation. It says that, you know, this is not a law. The notification is not creating a law. It is just extending something which was already in a law. So, you know, there is no question of overriding. That is what Chhattisgarh High Court said, that they are just enhancing the time limit. Like, you know, we have return filing. The return filing time limit is already given in the law. But if I'm extending the time limit, I'm not creating a new law. I'm just supporting the law. That is what was said by the Chhattisgarh High Court. And it said that all the notices are valid, even if they were issued under the old law. This was the only decision which was in favor of revenue. Apart from that, all the decisions were in favor of the assessee. Allahabad High Court ruled that delegated legislature cannot override the principal legislature. One of the most exhaustive judgments is Delhi High Court judgment, based on which Rajasthan, Calcutta and Bombay High Court has relied upon. So this is the most exhaustive. If one wants to read, this is the most exhaustive, which discusses this entire controversy with all the dates which I've covered here. It says that notifications which have extended the time period is definitely ultra vires, and therefore it is, because you cannot have a notification after the Income Tax Act. It is almost like overruling the act, and such notification is illegal, it is null and it is void. Then we had, you know, Rajasthan, Calcutta and Bombay High Court. All of these decisions followed the Delhi High Court, and the first one which went before the Supreme Court was this Allahabad High Court, which went before. So let me give you the statistics here. There were almost 90,000 plus notices which were issued between these 3 months, April, May and June of 21. Out of this 90,000 cases, around 9,000 cases were filed before the High Court. And so I think I don't remember any High Court wherein there is no writ petition which has been filed. It's almost reached all the High Courts of the country. Out of that 99,000, except for Chhattisgarh, as I mentioned, everyone was in favor of the assessee. All the High Courts were in favor of assessee. However, interestingly, there were only 9 SLPs which were there before the Supreme Court. When this ruling came out in May, there were only 9 SLPs. So that means, what does that mean? That means that the revenue either was in process of filing a SLP before the Supreme Court, or probably they would have accepted the High Court decision, either of the case. But that is the statistics when it comes to it. Now, you know, discussing that what were the different kinds of notices, because that is the issues which we have various interesting. I probably may not be able to cover all kind of scenarios, because really there are many interesting scenarios which have happened, but I tried to bucket and simplify into timelines, into period which is involved. So all the notices which have been issued prior to 31st March 21. So if it is issued prior to 31st March 21, Supreme Court decision is not valid. Is not valid in the sense, it is not relevant for that particular period. So all notices which are issued for assessment year 13, 14 and onwards are very much valid, because 6 years law was applicable. So there is no controversy. So if you have received a notice, or if the notice was issued before March 21, then you will have to see the earlier law. So obviously, if you want to challenge the legality, you will have to see the earlier law. What I mean valid is that the time period is valid. If there is, if it is time barred, or, you know, because of some other reason, it is 4 years have already expired, that is a different situation. But that is not the matter of controversy here. Notice issued between 1st April 21 to 30th June 21. As I mentioned, that this is the litigation period. Now, what happens to various notices? Now, there are dispute here. Revenue stand is different because they have already given a Cbd instruction. Whatever has been given, I'm giving a disclaimer is as regards to my understanding. However, before delivering a lecture here and various other study circles before, I have tried to accumulate the rationale of various other professionals and various other seniors, and more or less everyone agrees to this particular rationale. So now, if the notices are pertaining to assessment year 13-14 and 14-15, which is these 2 years, as I had mentioned in my earlier slide, assessment year 13-14 and 14-15, 6 years, normal simple calculation, 6 years from the end of the assessment year, was the time limit was 31st March 21 as per the law, as per the extension of TOLA also. So 31st March 21 was there and 6 years had elapsed. So now that I'm just giving the facts, I'm not giving any rationale, but 6 years had, and this is an undisputed fact that 6 years had expired. Okay. Now coming to, then we will read section 149 once more, that what is going to happen to these 2 years. For assessment of 15-16 and 16-17, 4 years have been passed under the old law. So suppose if there is no escapement or no failure on the part of the assessee, or the escaped amount is less than rupees 1 lakh, which is the earlier law, in that case, 4 years have already been elapsed. So now when I read these provisions with respect to the first proviso of section 149, section 149, which is the grandfathering proviso, it says that if as per the old law, as on 31st March 21, if the notices were time barred, then you cannot reopen under the new law. So by that logic of provision of section 141, assessment year 13-14 and assessment year 14-15, there can be no reopening. Although Supreme Court has not specifically told that, because that was not the subject matter of before the Supreme Court, but that is what is the culmination or the conclusion of the Supreme Court judgment, which we will discuss the Supreme Court judgment. So this is when it comes to 13-14 and 14-15. 15-16 and 16-17, if the question is of 4 years, again the same will apply, that they are also time barred. Only if it is more than 1 lakh, then probably it can be reopened. And assessment years up to assessment year 16-17, which is anything beyond 17-18, the 3 years have passed. So now when we come to the new law, wherein you have 3 years period, then there is 3 years and 10 years. So if 3 years have passed under the new law, and if escapement is less than 50 lakhs, then they cannot even open anything up to 16-17. Only if it is beyond 50 lakhs, they can open. If it is less than 50 lakhs, then they can start reopening only from assessment year 18-19 and not before that. Before assessment year 17-18. So notices of 17-18, 18-19 and 19-20 is something they can do. But before that, they cannot touch if it is less than 50 lakhs. So because this all is going to be coming before, second, I think many of you have started receiving the new notices. I have received plenty of them because they have a mandate to issue it before 2nd of June. So it is just hardly 10 days time. And now the third leg, notices which are issued on or after 1st July, which is after the 30th June. This is not the scope of Supreme Court ruling. So now what happens to those notices? Now your new section applies, and the new section 10 years and 3 years. So wherever 10 years applicability is there, from assessment year 15-16, they can open. Why I'm telling assessment year 15-16? Now technically, if you calculate 10 years backward, then it should be assessment year 12-13 or assessment year 13-14. But why I'm excluding? Again, taking the benefit of proviso to section 149, which says that earlier assessment years which are already time barred, the new section cannot touch. So that is why 13-14, 14-15, had it been a case that there was no Supreme Court ruling or there was no litigation, even in that case, 1314 and 1415 cannot be reopened now. That is something which is my conclusion out of reading of various judgments. And all notices which have been issued after 1819. So suppose if you have received any notice of 1718 or 1618 or 1617, after 1st July, they are also not valid if it is less than 50 lakhs. So this, one may go back to the notice one has received and try to fit it into these provisions and see, because it's very difficult to give an answer for one specific case, because it will be completely dependent upon the facts of each case. But this could be the broader parameters to understand that what is going to now happen to whatever notices which have been issued. Now, the Supreme Court ruling in case of Ashish Agarwal. So this decision came on 4th of May. And I have already explained, that what was the controversy, what was the new law and what was the old law. Now, before getting into that, what the decision is there and, how they have laid down and what rationale they have put into, because I think we have read lots of articles, lots of newspaper articles and comments from many of them, even from the horse's mouth or advocates which were presenting before the Supreme Court. Just one thing which, I would like take a liberty to give my viewpoint is that the million-dollar question everyone has about the Supreme Court decision is whether it is favoring the assessee or whether it is favoring the revenue. And this is something which, I have been asked also by many of them, many of the clients too, that, it is favoring revenue. After reading everything put together and after reading the petitions which were filed before the Supreme Court, my view is that it is not, this particular judgment is not against anyone. It is favoring the assessee. At the same time, it is favoring the revenue. So this is a very typical judgment where you cannot, compartmentalize whether it is in favor or it is against the revenue or against the assessee. It is favoring both the sides. And the reasons for that, I will, bring it to when I browse through the slides. But that is, probably with that thought process, we look into the Supreme Court ruling of how the ruling has come into. So para 7, 8 and 9 are the holding paragraphs of the Supreme Court judgment. And the main verdict of Supreme Court is as simple as that they accept that the revenue authorities have messed up. They accept that there is a mistake which is done by the revenue authorities. However, even after accepting that, they have given that verdict that all the notices which were issued between April to June should be considered as valid notices. They should not be considered as invalid. It should be considered as a one-time measure taken by the Supreme Court, wherein they are validating all the notices and they are telling that although we are validating the new notices, the new law will apply. Since the law was applicable from 1st April 21, any notice which is issued after 1st April 21, whichever year notice it is, the new law will apply. That is the verdict of Supreme Court. Now, it is famously called as a balancing act judgment, because they have mentioned that in the Supreme Court ruling. So what is meant, by balancing act or how it is given is, just a minute. Sorry. Yes. So I thought that, the best way which I can explain is, I think many of you would have already read, but I think I wanted to read para 8 of the Supreme Court ruling, because that is something which will, help in the unsettled issues also. So I'll read it from the Supreme Court decision itself, which gives acceptance. Okay. However, at the same time, the judgments of several high courts would result in no reassessment proceedings at all. It says that we agree with the high court rulings, but if we accept that then there will be no reassessment proceedings, even if the same are permissible under the Finance Act and as per substituted provisions of the new section 147 to 151 of the Income Tax Act. Revenue cannot be made remediless, and the object and the purpose of reassessment proceedings cannot be frustrated. It is true that due to a bona fide mistake and in a view of subsequent extension of time, so they are writing bona fide mistake of the revenue authorities. It is true that because of the bona fide mistake and the subsequent extension of time via various notifications, the revenue issued the notice under 148 after the amendment was enforced with effect from 1st April 21 under the unamended section 148. So they are accepting the fact that the new notices were issued under the unamended section, whereas the section was already amended. In our view, the same ought not to have been issued. They are giving a view in favor of the assessee, in favor of High Court. This is where I'm telling that there is a favorable decision, because this is what was contested before the High Courts. And in view of this, we feel that it is not ought to be have been issued under the substituted provisions of the Income Tax Act. There appears to be genuine non-application of the amendments, as the officers of the revenues were under a bona fide belief that the amendments may not have been enforced. Therefore, we are of the opinion that some leeway must be shown in that regard, which the High Courts could have done so. Therefore, instead of quashing and setting aside the reassessment notices under the unamended provisions, the High Court ought to have passed an order construing the notices issued under unamended provisions as those deemed to have been issued under section 148A. So what they are telling is they are agreeing that what High Court has done is correct. They are agreeing that revenue has made a big mess out of this entire situation. A delegated legislation cannot override the question which we had at the earlier instance. It cannot override the principal legislature. And the notifications are incorrect, because notifications cannot extend a time limit which is already changed. Something which is not there only, how can you amend that? The old provisions were never there because it got resubstituted. So if it is substituted, how can you make an extension of the time limits? This is what the Supreme Court says. But they did not wanted to quash 90,000 matters. No, they did not wanted to do that. Plus, they knew that there are many matters which are going to come into picture. This is not going to be the end of the litigation. They wanted to stop everything here. And that is the reason they told that whatever notices we have issued, you please consider that as notices issued under section 142A, which means a show cause notice. So what they have done, they have not rendered anything in favor of revenue. Rather, what they are telling is that had it been, if this notices, forget that there was no notification, forget that there was no TOLA. Okay, there was an old provision and there was new provision. So what would have the assessing officer would have done? These 90,000 notices would have been issued. Nevertheless, whether there was a notification or whether there was no. But what they would have issued under 148A. So that is what we are telling. You consider those notices under 148A, give the assessee show cause notice before 2nd of June. They have given 30 days period. So give it before 2nd of June or 3rd of June. Give the assessee an opportunity to be heard. And then you issue 148 notice. So the entire procedure which we discussed in the earlier slides, all have to be followed. Now, why this is better rather than, quashing the notices is for the only reason is, in fact, there are multiple reasons, not one. First, that if they would have quashed and they would have agreed in favor of the High Court litigants, which is the assessee, what would have happened? They would have quashed everything. The assessing authority would have been given the liberty to issue a fresh notice, because the new proceedings already have 10 years period. We should remember that it already has 10 years period. So they would have again issued, all 90,000 cases would have been dropped. Then again 90,000 notices would have been issued, and the assessee would have to again reply to them. Now, rather than getting into that procedure and wasting the cost and time and efforts of everyone involved, what they did is that they told that you consider this notice only as a show cause notice. But we cannot completely quash, because if we completely quash, then there will be no reassessment for another 1 year. all 90,000 notices. One very important point which they are mentioning is that there is a loss of exchequer. You have to, the public exchequer is something which they will have to do it. And that is the reason they invoked Article 142 of the Constitution. Article 142 in very simple terms means that if it gives an unfettered powers to Supreme Court, in exceptional circumstances, they can take a decision to have a balance of rights. Sometimes they can take such kind of a drastic decision which balances both the parties to, save something. Like here, they are saving the public exchequer because there was, I think, crores of rupees which would be involved in these notices. So to do that, they can invoke Article 142. That is one thing, to bring a balance. And second thing, what Article 142 says is that it applies to pan-India. It applies to entire country. The reason of doing that, normally in a case where Supreme Court, especially when it is a hearing for income tax cases before the Supreme Court, the ruling is only applicable to the respondent and the petitioner. So if I am filing an appeal before the Supreme Court, whatever verdict Supreme Court is giving is only applicable to me. It is not applicable to all the pending notices. Even though it may be the same case, but it will not be applicable. But here, since they have invoked Article 142, whether there was writ petition or no, whether it was pending before the Supreme Court or High Court or even the assessing officer, it will apply to pan-India, to all the notices which have been issued. So they wanted to put an end to all the litigation because of this time period mess. And that is the reason Article 142 was invoked. It was a special purpose article. It is, I have heard many times that, this article has been incorrectly utilized. Now I leave that to the wisdom of the apex court of the country, and I would not like to comment on the wisdom. But Article 142, I just want to clarify, it is not the first time in history of income tax that it has been applied. It has been applied multiple times in the past. It is just that the magnanimity of the cases in reopening is so much that it came to our attention that there is this one Article 142 which can be exercised by Supreme Court, but it has been used many times in the past in income tax cases and also in other civil law cases. So it is something which has been done in the past. It's not a first time affair, and something which is tried to protect and to bring a balance of judgment and to reduce controversies. Basically, that was the entire intention of the Supreme Court. And as I've already given my view, that I really feel that it is a balancing act judgment. It tries to balance both. Whatever petitions which were filed by the assessee was that only, that notices should be issued under the new law. That was the entire petition. It was not that the notices are incorrect. The petition was that only by the High Court, by the assessee, that it has to be under the new law because new law is already prevailing. And that is what they have done. They have agreed to that yes, we agree that new law should apply, but we will not strike down. We will apply the new law. So now what is the outcome of this Supreme Court ruling, which is going to apply to all of us? That notices issued under 148 will be deemed to be notice issued under 148A, which is the show cause notice. 148B, that is what I mean, 148 subclause B, because they have told that, subclause A, which is there, which is the verification stage, that has to be dispensed with. It's a one-time measure. They have told that 148A clause, subclause A is not required. It will be directly 148 subclause B. Within 30 days from the date of the Supreme Court order, that is why it is calculated as 2nd June. The Supreme Court, the assessing authorities has to provide information to the assessee. So we have started receiving notices wherein it is not notice, they name it as letter. They name it as letter in pursuance to Supreme Court ruling, and they give us the information. The information is nothing but a reproduction of reasons recorded. That is what I have seen in whatever limited notices we have received. Assessee has to reply within 2 weeks. Although here I feel a little this thing that AO has been given 30 days, but the assessee is given only 2 weeks. But I think if an adjournment is required, probably they will give it. So within 2 weeks, but we'll, if we have received notices for our clients in this period in the past, in the last 1 year, then one has to start preparing for the information right in, because there is no new information which is going to be given. believe me, because they don't have anything. They can't create the information at this stage. So whatever information which they are going to give is basically nothing but reasons which they have recorded. AO shall pass an order under 148 AD and all defenses. Now this is the most favorable part which I feel, unlike many others, there will be many differences of opinion here, but all defenses which may be available under 149. Now what are those defenses is something which we will have to figure out with time will be the biggest factor which will determine that. In the coming few days, few weeks, we will understand that what all defenses which we can use under 149. However, all the defenses which are available under section 149 or available under the Finance Act 21, both are kept open and shall continue to be available. Now, with this, the Supreme Court, as to my mind, is indirectly hinting that proviso to section 149 should be used. Proviso to section 149 can be used by the assessee, and that remedy is given to the assessee. So the assessee can very well use that in its particular case and do it. And order shall apply to all the notices in the interim period. So as I mentioned, it is going to apply to all 90,000 notices which were issued in that particular period. Okay. Now, after the Supreme Court ruling came CBD instruction. So, okay, sorry, before the instruction, I think I have not taken that as in the part of any of the slides, but immediately the decision came on 4th of May. Immediately, as on the 4th May decision came, 5th May, the Income Tax Employee Federation, they wrote a representation to the CBDT that the Supreme Court ruling, now that was in such a haste manner. I've read that representation and it seemed it was a very well worded representation of the Employees Federation Association. It wrote to CBDT asking that please give us some directions. Please let us know, because only 30 days were given, right? So they were also, because there were 90,000 notices. So they had to know that how they are going to deal with it. And they wrote to CBDT that please give us some directions or instructions of how we are going to implement the Supreme Court ruling. And in that representation made to CBDT, they have jotted down multiple issues that what are going to happen. Now those multiple issues, some of the issues I've tried to cover in the issue slides here. Unfortunately, CBDT instruction has not even covered half of those issues. Surprisingly, I don't know why, but that is how it is. So CBDT instruction number 1 came on 11th May. And what does the instruction say? It says that this is an instruction which is there to implement the Supreme Court judgment. It applies to all notices challenged or not. So now what I mean here by challenged here is that even if suppose you have received a notice and you have not even written any objection at the assessment stage also. Suppose there was a notice which was received and you started giving information. You started complying with the assessment. So you never challenged even to the AO. Then also this Supreme Court ruling is going to apply. Because whether you challenge at the AO, at the High Court or the Supreme Court, wherever the case may be. Assessment year 13-14, 14-15 and 15-16. Notices to be issued only if escapement is more than 50 lakhs. So this is something which is, what we may say, happy moment and sad moment put together. Why happy? Because we know that if there is less than 50 lakhs, CBDT is very clear that there will be no notice. So no notice will be issued if it is less than 50 lakhs for 13-14, 14-15 and 15-16. Why 15-16 is included is something which I'm wondering, but anyways. So this is one thing. However, the sad part or the unfortunate part of it is that we have already discussed in length that why 13-14 and 14-15 is not a part of the reassessment proceedings at all. So when it comes to assessment year 13-14 and 14-15, the notices were issued under the old provision. However, Supreme Court says that the new provision will apply. When you apply the new provision, you apply new section 149. And when you apply the new section 149, you apply the grandfathering clause. And then 1314 and 1415 becomes redundant. So now when the provision is applicable, how the limit of 50 lakhs is also coming into picture. The CBDT instruction rather should have given an instruction that 1314 and 1415 are beyond scope. And that is why no notice will be issued even if the escapement amount is more than 50 lakhs. So according to my mind, that is the one of the view. There could be an alternative view, but my view is that for 1314 and 1415, whether it is 50 lakhs or whether it is above 50 lakhs, notices cannot be issued. However, CBDT instruction is giving that parameter of 50 lakhs, and unfortunately, I don't know why that is being done. Now, another thing what it says is that assessment year 16-17 and assessment year 17-18. Sorry. Assessment year 16-17 and 17-18, if it is less than 3 years, therefore no notice is to be issued. So they are categorizing things that 13-14 to 15-16 they have already dealt with. Now when it comes to 16-17 and 17-18, if it is since they are less than 3 years, therefore notices to be issued. So they are clarifying that for 16-17 and 17-18 you are 100% going to get notice irrespective of the amount of escapement. Now, this is the biggest flaw or the error in the CBDT instruction. With any plain logic or mathematical skills, how 16-17 and 17-18 are within 3 years? 16-17 is year ending is 31st March 17. Clearly 3 years expires on 31st March 2020. So how they are within 3 years, even for 17-18, it falls by 31st March 21. If you do simple calculation and add 3 years, it comes by 31st March 21. So how can CBDT say that less than 3 years are there and therefore notices to be issued? Ideally, what should have been there? That in case in 16-17 and 17-18, if the escapement amount is more than 50 lakhs, then notices to be issued. However, if it is less than 50 lakhs, then again answering to that question, for 16-17 and 17-18 also, they cannot issue you a reopening notice. They have to drop following the Supreme Court judgment and following the Section 149 time limits. Now they are giving that information will be provided for assessment year 13-14 to 15-16 of how they are going to deal with that. So now they've understood that 13-14 to 15-16 are special cases and there will be separate information. Till date, there is no information which has been received. However, they have mentioned in the instruction that they will give some separate information and separate instructions will follow. 2 weeks period start from the date of communication of information. So as soon as they give you information, 2 weeks period and time may be given to respond. So they are clarifying in the instruction that if you ask for an adjournment, we will give you, in short. So obviously that is a welcome move. They know that it will take time to reply to these notices. But this is what CBDT instruction says. Rather than clarifying, I feel CBDT instruction has messed up many things. It could be more clear, but it has probably, I don't know why, but it has messed up the interpretation of Supreme Court ruling. Just one point which I would like to say at this stage is that CBDT instruction is, it's a trite law that CBDT instruction is only binding on the income tax authorities or assessing authorities. It is not binding on the assessing. It is not binding on the CIT appeal or any of the appellate authorities. It is basically an instruction to follow for the assessing authorities, and that is why not necessarily be binding on the assessee, and assessee can definitely challenge the instruction and even the issuance of wrong notice. So just because there is an instruction, that doesn't mean that is the law of the land. It is just an administrative provision and binding on the income tax authorities. However, since it is binding on the income tax authorities, all income tax authorities or assessing officers are going to do all of this unless there is some clarification. There is some representation also which we are making against the CBD instruction. But if they don't give any clarification or if they don't give any addendum to this CBD instruction, then all the AO across the country are going to follow this. And it is going to create another wheel or another cycle of litigation altogether, especially for the earlier years. Yeah. Now, before I get questions from all of you, I myself have added many questions which I had, which some of them I have answers, some of them we don't, some of them are gray areas. So, but these are some common issues which are open and unsettled even after Supreme Court has already ruled. So what are they? Cases where writ petitions are not filed. So these are normal questions which have been FAQs sort of thing, which have been asked by many of them immediately after the Supreme Court ruling came. That what if we have not filed writ petition, or what we have not challenged the notice at the assessment stage? I have already answered that irrespective whether you challenge or you don't, it is not going to be, going to affect you. It is going to apply. The Supreme Court ruling is going to apply to you. Cases where assessments already concluded before the Supreme Court ruling. Now, this is one thing which I do not have a perfect answer for, that what is going to happen. I'll give you an example. Suppose if there was an assessment year 13-14 notice. I'll take 13-14 only example because that is something which is favorable after the Supreme Court ruling. So if there is an assessment year 13-14 notice which you received on 30th June, and you contested the legal part, or you did not, let us say that you did not contested the legal part or the issuance of notice, and you gave all the details, and after giving all the details, the assessment was already concluded because the notice was received in 21. So it can happen that the assessment was concluded, and it has happened practically in our cases. By that time, the litigation, your Supreme Court has already ruled. And according to the ruling, we are fairly, we have fairly come to a conclusion that 13-14 is not valid. Now, you are already at the appellate stage because assessment order was passed, something was detrimental, and you are filing the appeal, or you are already at the assessment stage. What to do? How to apply the Supreme Court ruling in that case? My only answer would be that if you are at the filing stage of the appeal, you can take this as a ground, the first ground of principle of natural justice, that the Supreme Court ruling came and it applies to all the notices, and it also applies to the current notice, and that is why this entire assessment is invalid. That is the ground which you should take. If you have already filed an appeal, then whenever the hearing comes up under faceless appeal, you can take this as an additional ground because it is a jurisdictional ground. It should be allowed. This is the normal conclusion which to happen. Now, this is for those cases. What about those cases like suppose it is assessment of 16-17, where there is no controversy, there's 2 crores addition, let us say 50 lakhs, more than 50 lakhs. So very well can reopen. However, they did not give me any show cause. They gave me reasons as per the old provisions, the entire assessment is concluded. And now I'm at the appellate stage. I'm at the filing stage. Now what do I do? Because if it is assessment year 16-17, Supreme Court says that the assessing officer has to construe my notice under 148 as a show cause notice. However, here the assessment is already concluded. So that opportunity which the Supreme Court is giving me, that opportunity I could never avail because the assessment is already over. So what to do in those cases? Frankly speaking, I do not have a concrete answer to that. With time, we'll come to know. One of the only logical explanations is that you have to challenge, you have to say that, I was not given the opportunity, and that was something which was ruled by the Supreme Court. And since the Supreme Court says that it is applicable to me, you have to give me opportunity. And since that opportunity was not given to me, or, directly a notice was issued to me, this assessment is not valid. That is something which one can take up, but I'm not too sure that what is going to happen in those cases. So that is something which we come to know. Now, whether, there was a notification dated 29th March 22, notification number 18. Yeah, this is the notification which I was talking about under section 151. Section 151, which is faceless assessment, reassessment schemes. 151A, sorry, not 151, section 151A, which is regarding faceless reassessments. This notification came up in 29th March, which says that reassessments will be handled under the faceless authorities. So whether these cases will come under the jurisdictional assessing officer or it will come under the faceless assessing officer right from start to end. This is one of the questions written by the Income Tax Employee Federation to the CBDT, which I mentioned earlier. As soon as the Supreme Court ruling came, they had written to them that please tell us that who is going to do that. Is the jurisdictional officer has to do, or has the faceless officer to do? Because they don't have clarity what they have to do. Because this notification came on 29th March. We don't know the answer to that, but think it will not make any difference whether it is jurisdictional or faceless. The assessments are going to happen. However, it is basically the jurisdiction. So they need some clarity. So with more of a clarificatory issue. Now, cases of assessment of 1516 to 1718, if there is less than 50 lakhs, what happens to those cases? So 1516 to 1718, if the new provisions apply as per Supreme Court, new time limits should apply, which means 3 years and 10 years. 3 years of 1718 gets expired on 31st March 21. And obviously, since 1718 gets expired, 1516 and 1617 goes without saying that they also expire as on 31st March 21. So technically, if I'm issuing a notice after 1st April 21, it has to be notices for assessment year 18-19 and onwards if the escapement amount is less than 50 lakhs. If it is more than 15 lakhs, then they have 10 years limit. So then 15-16 can also be reopened, 17-18 can also be reopened. But what if it is less than 50 lakhs? Then I fall into 3 years limit. I don't fall into 10 years time limit. Then what does happen? My view and first preliminary view over this is that because of the Supreme Court ruling, if you read 49 section and the Supreme Court ruling put together, if you read both together, then all the assessments of assessment year 1516 to 1718, if it is less than 50 lakhs, they also get time barred as on 31st March 21. And since they get time barred as on 31st March 21, notices cannot be again issued for those. So this is the first preliminary view over the same. If it is beyond 50 lakhs, they can very well do it. What in cases when new notices can be issued, but information not flagged as per risk management strategy? Now remember, I had strike down that word flagged. However, that striking off was applicable with effect from 1st April 22. So now, right now, whatever notices which we have started receiving, those are all different information from inside portal. But what do you mean by flagged information? Because we don't know what is, it's not provided that what is a flagged information. But will there be any nexus between the reasons which are recorded? Because all the notices which were issued in April to June period were old section. Old section told reasons recorded. So when reasons were recorded, reasons could be any information. It could be information from some investigation authority. It could be from some SEBI authorities, or from some Hawala parties, or from some search parties. Most of the penny stock and bogus stock matters come like that only. But does that information qualify to be the flagged information as per the risk management strategy? That is something which is an open question. I'm just putting it across, putting a thought process or a food for thought for everyone. Very technical issue, but something worth pondering upon. Reasons would already have been recorded. Yes. Will that be commensurate to information under new regime? Now, what is reasons? We have now, this is where our understanding of the earlier slides come into place, that reasons and deemed reasons as per the old provision were different, and information and deemed information as per the new provision is different. Okay, so their entire intention to bring the new law was they wanted to separate reasons from information. However, what Supreme Court wants that reasons should be considered as information, because now they cannot supply something fresh, right? They can't supply a fresh information just because a Supreme Court ruling has come into picture. That means there has to be some information. Now, how will they find information? They do not have any recourse to that, and they cannot supply anything new. That means what, and that is what I practically have seen. We've received multiple notices in last 3 days. And in all of that, information is a replica of reasons recorded by just changing 1 or 2 lines at the start and 1 or 2 lines at the end. That's it. Otherwise, it is a verbatim reproduction of reasons which have been recorded, which were issued with 147. So is it okay? Is it okay to, just by telling, that is something which I think, which is a technical problem of the Supreme Court ruling, not a fairness issue, but a practical problem. Can you say that what reasons were recorded are exactly what is the information under the new section? If you do that, then where is the difference between the old section and the new section? So yeah, there is one difference. Answer to that is, there is one difference. The difference is that their reasons were supplied, but notice under 148 was confirmed. Reassessment was confirmed. Here in this case, reasons will become information, but it will be only at the show cause notice stage. It will not be a confirmed notice. It will give you a disposal order. It will give you a show cause notice. You will have to make a reply. They will have to dispose it off, and only then they could have issued the reopening notice under 148. So this is basically, the difference between that. However, I still feel that there is some lapse. You cannot, link reasons recorded and information on record, because reasons recorded, I would feel, is much wider terminology as compared to information, especially when it is flagged information, because earlier law was applicable. Also, one has to understand reasons would have been for anything. It could have been for an asset, it could have been for an expenditure, it could have been for an entry in books of accounts, or it could be anything else, because there was no criteria in the old law. However, under the new law, they had to have information only with respect to an asset, because expenditure and entry came later on, and that is not with retrospective effect. So it is only information relating to an asset. So now what one has to see in each of the case, you have to see that whether this information is as per the new section or not. Is it an information which is as per section 148A? Is it an information which is pertaining to an asset and it is more than 50 lakhs? If it is not pertaining to an asset, suppose if it is regarding, if it is regarding a penny stock, suppose I'm giving an example, you are a trader, wherein penny stock is nothing but it is your stock in trade. It's not a capital gains or it is nothing like that, and you offer business income. So now it is not pertaining to an asset because it is your stock in trade. Stock in trade cannot be considered in that perfect definition of asset because that has share securities and all those things. So there also there is a question whether you compartmentalize based on the heads or shares and securities across the array. However, will you say that that is an information under section 148A, or will you contest that before the assessing officer that look, this was very much a good reason under the old provision, but under the new provision, it has to be information under the definition or the explanation under section 148A. And since it is not as per their definition, it is not an information. And since it is not an information, this notice is invalid. So this is something which one has to look into specifically with respect to each facts of the case. Every fact has to be considered, and then you have to see whether the new provisions will be applying or not. I think Fallacies of the CBD instruction I have already dealt with while discussing the instruction itself, that there are too many flaws in the instruction, and I just hope they bring some clarification or some corrigendum to that. Otherwise, it is going to be a nightmare for all the cases. Now, sanction would have been taken by different authorities under old regime. Now, I had mentioned the section 151, we had different authorities for 4 and 6 years. And under this one, under the new law, we have different authorities. Say, Supreme Court decision is silent on the sanction part. So, does it mean that sanction which was given before issuing of notices to the reasons recorded, will it be okay to have the same sanction under the new regime? I would say it is not okay. That would be my answer, but I'm with the disclaimer that there could be two views on this. Why? Because Supreme Court may not mention anything about section 151, but it does mention that to all the notices, the new law will apply. When it says that the new law will apply, new section 151 will apply, that means that suppose if they are now issuing you a letter or they are providing you with information in accordance with the Supreme Court ruling, then at this stage also they have to take sanction from the relevant authority. While passing a disposal order, they have to take prior approval of the authority as per the new section 151. So now you must have started receiving notice, see whether there is a sanction or not. Secondly, once you file a reply, there will be a disposal order. In that disposal order also, there should be a prior approval. So see to it that there is a prior approval as per the new section, not as per the old section. So authorities are different in both. So that has to be considered, and just few points to be borne in mind when we deal with these cases. In another 2 weeks' time, we are definitely going to be loaded with many notices of these kind. Notices to be issued within 30 days, irrespective of status of. So yes, there are certain cases, certainly there are several cases which are pending before High Court. Because not everyone has reached Supreme Court stage, right? Especially Bombay High Court, all matters are before High Court only, because Bombay High Court was the last to give judgment. So what if your cases are before the High Court? What if they are before the High Court and they are stayed? There is an injunction order. All of those will get relieved, according to me. That is a finding in the Supreme Court decision too, that irrespective wherever your notices are stuck, wherever if there is an assessment which is concluded and it is at appellate stage, or you have challenged it before the High Court and it is under stay, or there is an injunction, or you have filed department has filed an SLP and it is before Supreme Court, whatever may be the issue, 30 days is going to irrespectively apply. There is no vacation of period given to that. There is no extension given there. They will have to issue notices come what may. The golden question is 2 weeks time sufficient to make a reply. They have told, Cbd instruction has been fair enough to say that they will give you adjournment if obviously there is a genuine reason. But since it is a verdict of the Supreme Court, they have to give you 2 weeks time. If they take any action before 2 weeks time, or if they don't give you 2 weeks time, as far as what is my experience in our firm is that they have not given any due date. They have blanketly written, please reply within 2 weeks. So they don't even want to give any days. They are going by the wordings of the Supreme Court decision, and they are saying that you give us your reply in 2 weeks time. However, many notices are still to be issued. So if you feel that the notices are giving a lesser period of time, then it is, it is against the Supreme Court decision. It can be challenged. I don't think they will do so unless it is a technical default in issuance of notice. They will give you 2 weeks time. But yes, in some cases, 2 weeks time may not be enough. In that case, you may ask for more time. But the reason for writing this question was only that we have to start being prepared. Start opening all those notices which we have received in the past, because you are going to start receiving even in those cases where the assessments are pending. So suppose Obviously, in a case where assessment is already concluded, we don't know whether they will issue the notice again or not. I think they cannot, because assessment is concluded. But for an assessment which you have already moved on, you have already litigated at the assessment stage, quoted all the High Court decisions and said that we object the reopening. However, without prejudice, we are giving you submissions, and you have started giving submissions. In those cases also, according to me, since they are pending before the assessing authority, they have to issue notice. And since they have to issue notice, you go back square to zero and you again start giving all the information. So I don't know how is that going to work. A lot of gray areas there that, you know, how you are going to deal with that. But yes, notices will be received even for those cases. Whether amended provisions of Finance Act 22 applies to Supreme Court ruling. Now, the question here, the meaning of this is that I have mentioned that there are some significant provisions which are amended in Finance Act 22. First is flagged information was removed. Audit by CAG was removed. Third was 50 lakhs limit, which was there only for 1 year, was for all the years. It was made a cumulative limit. And the fourth and the most important, they added 2 further categories of expenses and entries in books of account. So these are the 4 most important amendments which were made. So whether can one say that Finance Act 22 was already passed and was already prevalent as on 4th May? 4th May is the date of the order of Supreme Court. Can one say that since Supreme Court had adjudicated after the Finance Act was passed, the Finance Act provisions will apply to the Supreme Court judgment? There are 2 views again, but I fairly speak that that should not be correct. If you do that, it will absorb the entire purpose of Supreme Court ruling, which was to balance. So ethically also it should not. Technically also I think it should not, because all these amendments of Finance Act 22, apart from the search and seizure amendments which were made, all those amendments were not with retrospective effect. They were with effect from 1st April 22. So although the amended provisions were there, but since they were with effect from 1st April 22, Supreme Court ruling will, though they were aware that there is amendment, but still the notices were period April to June 21. And since these amendments were applicable with effect from 22, they should not apply. Logically, technically, ethically, either ways, I think it should not apply. Another thing which strengthens my point is that everywhere in the Supreme Court ruling, wherever they have reproduced section 148, wherever they have reproduced 148A, they have reproduced the earlier provisions, which is Finance Act 21 provisions and not the new provisions. That itself would also mean that though Supreme Court was aware that there is a new act which has been passed, they continued to apply the earlier, because this Supreme Court ruling applies only to rule of law as per Finance Act 2021 and not as per 2022. So I'm clear in my mind, but yes, this could be one of the issue. Now leaving, I think lots of controversy and discussion and lots of time I took towards the Supreme Court ruling. Coming to the critical issues under the new proceedings. So now, given that we accept what has happened, because we don't have any option as such anyways. So we accept that what has happened, we accept the Supreme Court decision, and now what to do? What is going to be doing for all the cases? Leave the period of April to June. Let's assume that now notices are issued right now. How do we deal with the 148A new proceedings? This is to all the notices apart from controversy. The real cases which we have started receiving now, which we received in 31st March 22. So when you receive a notice under 148, you receive 3 things. Either you receive 148A subclause A verification notice, you receive a show cause notice, you receive an order under subclause D, and then you receive the main notice under 148. So these are the 4 things which you receive from the income tax authority. If you want to challenge, at which stage you should challenge? If you want to challenge before the High Court, because the only way where you can challenge, there are only 2 ways in which you can challenge. One is you challenge to the assessing authority, tell them that I don't agree, boss. I don't agree to what you've done. However, without prejudice to that, I'm giving you these submissions. That is one way. Second way is that you say that, no, I'm going to challenge at the High Court level. So these are the only 2 ways where you challenge the legality of the issue of notice. This is the only way you protest. But at which stage you should file a writ petition? My answer is you can file writ petition at all stages, because there is no bar which says wherever there is a misuse of power, or wherever there is something which is beyond jurisdiction, you can file a writ petition under Article 226. So that can be done. However, if you file a writ petition at the stage of subclause A or subclause B or subclause D, which is all the show cause notice issuance, it might fall back on you by High Court authorities telling that, look, 148A, B and D are provisions which are before issuance of notice under 148. Those are show cause notices, and you cannot come to the High Court if you're not exhausting the remedies which are already given to you. So they may say that, well, we have given you this. The Act has given you all these powers that, it has given you opportunities to reply. So why don't you reply at that stage? Let the order come, let the notice under 148 come, and then we will see that whether that 148 is valid or not. That can happen. I'm just telling, it has happened also. So that can, because many times in the past, High Courts have held that you have to exhaust all your remedies, and then only then you can knock the doors of High Court, not before that. You cannot disturb High Court at every small notice which you are going to receive. So see to it that there is some gross violation or some gross jurisdictional issue if you are doing a writ petition at the issuance of show cause notice stage itself. Otherwise, the valid notice which could be challenged would be notice under 148, because notice under 148 is a jurisdictional notice. All other notices and orders are pre-jurisdictional. So when you are challenging jurisdiction before High Court, it has to be a jurisdictional notice. So just, because many are confused and that what stage we should challenge, which notices should be objected. Think if something is wrong, all notices should be objected. So this is just a question with the just to show that we have right to object everything, because that is our free right. You can object the verification notice under subclause A. You can object the 140 subclause B notice. You can object the order. Even after doing everything, if you feel that if you have taken you don't want to go to High Court route, okay, and you want to continue the assessment route, I would say this is the step which many of us skip in the new proceedings. What they do is that they feel that since I have replied to the show cause notice, and since I have replied to the verification notice, once the disposal order is coming under subclause D, and once the notice is being issued 148, I have exhausted my remedies. I have already objected and filed everything under protest. Now I have to file a return and I have to obey and go further. We go one step further. What we do is we file the return. Return is required to be filed. We file the return under protest and we write a letter, the first letter, which goes in issuance of notice under 148. Before filing the details, we also challenge the notice under 148. Not only we challenge the prior notices, but we also challenge the notice under 148. Even if it is customary of one paragraph, we say that we are participating in this proceedings under protest. And we are contesting the legality of the notice under. Why this is helpful? This is helpful at the later stage when you go at the appellate authorities. So challenging each and every notice at the assessment level is extremely important on the legal grounds. Can notice, now this is one thing which is very disheartening is that now they have, since 148A subclause A, which is a verification notice, it's a optional notice, as I mentioned, which is at an inquiry stage. Now I have received for few of my clients wherein they have issued a 148A notice like a full-fledged questionnaire, as if it is like a regular assessment. Now normally there has to be some information which they have to give us. And based on that information, now what happens is that information is not given at the subclause A stage, because subclause A is just the inquiry stage. So they are not telling us that what information they are not required to do that. Now, because of which what they are doing is they are asking me 2-3 pages full-fledged questionnaire, asking me each and everything about my business during that year. And complying to that notice is, I'm duty bound to do that, because if I non-comply, then, they will give any report and then there will be definitely an assessment which is going to happen. So, I come into a catch-22 situation here, wherein when I am at the inquiry stage, the entire purpose of section 148A, what was the purpose? That there should be no reassessment. Or before happening a reassessment, you have sufficient opportunity to explain that why there should be no reassessment. Now, if at that stage itself you are conducting an actual assessment, then what's the point? What's the point of having section 148A, right? Because then that means that you are actually complying to everything. Might as well, there could be an assessment without 148A itself. So what I'm telling here is that it's kind of a catch-22, because you don't know whether you have to reply to all this. What we do is that if we have information in hand, we restrict ourselves to reply to that only. We don't reply everything. Because if you reply to everything and you adhere to every information which is being asked upon, then it is almost like a regular assessment or a reopening assessment, which is not the purpose of the section. So if you feel that there is some information which is not, some inquiries which are not related to the information which are given to you, which are supplied to you, then in that case, you can choose to not answer. Either you don't answer and take an adjournment for the same, or you simply don't answer, whatever may be the thing. But either ways, the assessment is anyways going to happen. Sadly so, I have not seen a single case where they have dropped the assessment up till now. Just in one of the case of ours, they got dropped because they made a similar information because of, the AIR information or the stamp duty information coming in both the years. Same information came in both the years. And because of that, they dropped the reassessment in one of the years and they did it in 1 year. So that was the only positive case where they dropped at the 148A stage itself. Apart from that, I have not seen any where they have not proceeded. Like they have proceeded in every case. They have, it's just customary, unfortunately. No opportunity versus inadequate opportunity. So this is more of when, to write at the assessment stage. Suppose if you are given 3 days time, 4 days time where there are festivals, there is weekend. This is happening very normally, They issue you notice on Friday, they tell you to reply by Monday in the assessment stage after the 148 and everything has been done, especially towards the end. So it is very relevant to record your dissatisfaction that there was no opportunity or there was inadequate opportunity. When there is no opportunity, you can challenge on the principle of natural justice. Even when there is inadequate opportunity, you can challenge on the base of natural justice. So if you feel that your powers were truncated or you were not given enough opportunity, please take it up at the level of the grounds when you file before CIT appeal that principle of natural justice was violated. Words and also, okay, the earlier section 147 mentioned that in the section itself, not in the explanation part, in the section itself, that the assessing officer can add whatever has been reason recorded and also any other income which is found. Now the word and also are relevant here. That was there in earlier section 147. What does word and also mean? And also means that if there is a X amount which has been reported under reasons recorded, then you can add X, but you can also add X and Y. But you cannot add only Y. You can't drop X and you can do only Y. You have to do both, because and also, which means you have to do both. And also words are missing from the new section 147. Because of that missing thing, can one say that there was an information for a X amount or for an X information, okay? There was an information for that. However, during the course of reassessment, they found something Y and they added Y and they dropped X. Can they do that? Because these wordings are missing. I would say technically or literally speaking with the provisions, they can do that. However, we have judgments in our favor, which you can read in the later slides, wherein they have mentioned about that, we have Jet Airways of Bombay High Court, Asian Paints, wherein they have told that, irrespective of whatever it is, the main issue for which you have reopened, you cannot forget that, and you can't go witch hunting for other issues. So if you take the purpose of that particular decision, you can try to apply that. But this is one just change or the difference in the provisions which I thought I should bring about before you all. So yeah, that's one of the issues. Now again, $1 million question is, even because of the Supreme Court ruling and even otherwise, how to compute 50 lakhs and according to whom is this 50 lakhs is to be calculated? According to the assessing officer, according to the assessee, and how do they compute? Because see, this is one thing which we are challenging left, right and center in all the notices. Because most of the notices which we are receiving right now are non-filer cases. Okay, or cases wherein the reported income is less and the asset value is too high and they want to know the source of the asset. Just because you do not have the source of the asset, does it mean that there is escapement? The answer is no. They have to prove that how it is escapement. They have to get into that procedure. What they are doing is that they are telling me that this is the amount, especially, in cases of traded derivatives, in cases of transactions of stock, in various cases where the person is a trader or is into currency markets, the volume of business is huge because there they make money on margins. Now, what they do is they take the entire turnover, which is an aggregate of pluses and minuses both, and they put it together. It is definitely going to be beyond 50 lakhs. That is the information. Just because you have received an information that I have purchased a property of 2 crore, does it mean that that 2 crores is escapement of income? It doesn't mean that. Only that amount which I'm not able to substantiate out of that 2 crores. Only the source which I cannot substantiate out of that 2 crores, that will be escapement of income, not the entire information. If you receive, suppose, this is a very classic example, which they've even given powers, fixed deposits. I have made 30 lakhs fixed deposits. What they will, sorry, not 30, let me take 70, which is beyond 50 lakhs. I have made 70 lakhs fixed deposits into my bank account in one day. They are issuing me a notice that you have made 70 lakhs deposit, there is escapement of income. Now, one has to understand fixed deposit is a principal amount. Not everything could be escapement, right? You compute the interest out of that. That is the escaped income if I have not offered that in my return of income. Or if there is TDS on that, that is the escapement income. If you are challenging the income part, if you're challenging the source part, then God knows how to derive 50 lakhs. But if you're challenging the income, compute a notional interest, see that whether that is beyond 50 lakhs or not. How can you say that entire 70 lakhs FD is escapement of income? That's impossible and irrational, right? Now, this is going to be very critical for assessees to challenge. especially after Supreme Court ruling, because 50 lakhs is going to be a determinant factor whether it is 3 years or whether it is 10 years. See, in earlier provisions also we had 1 lakh, but there no, the limit of 1 lakh was almost useless because all the escaped income was beyond 1 lakh only. But hardly any case 1 lakh didn't have any value. But now 50 lakhs is substantial, and that is why this is a dispute now. Otherwise, earlier also we had a limit, but that limit was not relevant enough. So now, if you feel that yes, there is information, yes, there is also escapement, but I accept both, but according to me, the escapement is not 50 lakhs. According to me, escapement is just 5 lakhs. And because of that, you cannot reopen beyond 3 years. If that is your ground, you have to take it at the starting stage itself. Because nobody knows how to compute 50 lakhs. Nobody knows who is going to compute that 50 lakhs. So just giving you, again, food for thought. Is it mandatory? This question, there are many people who keep asking, is it mandatory to file return in pursuance to notice under 148? And another question I'll add to it, that suppose if you don't file a return, can they proceed with the assessment? So first, I will answer the second question. Okay, yes, even if you don't file your return of income under 148, they can still do. What they will do, at the most what they will do, they will issue interest under section 234A, or they will issue you notice for non-filing of return. They might penalize you. They might prosecute you also. We know that how prosecutions are done recently. So there is a section which says that if you don't file return, then under 148, then you can be prosecuted under section 276CC. I would say two things here. First, it is mandatory to file return under section 148 if you have not challenged the legality before High Court. If you have challenged before High Court, there is no requirement to file the return. But if you are not challenging, you are challenging only at the assessment stage, you will have to definitely file a return. Even if your assessee is a non-filer, you will still have to make a return of income for the first time and file it. But it's mandatory to file return. If you don't file return, you will have penal prosecution and interest consequences. And another thing is, please do not reply to the notice that consider my earlier return as the same return under 148. That is something which I've seen very often, people doing that, saying that please consider the earlier return, and they don't even reply to the if you see in the electronic tab against the 148 notice, you cannot write anything. You can just submit the return. There is no clause. There are only two tabs. One is submit, one is adjournment. So there are people who don't submit anything, and then in the reply they write that please consider my earlier return as the return under 148. Do not do that. Please file a fresh return under section 148 because it is system processed. The assessment at a later stage will have to be done by a faceless officer, and he will have to see the return filed. If you have not filed the return, you will have to face the interest. 153C had a satisfaction note concept. That means section 153A was for those assessees on whose premises the search is conducted. Section 153C is all related parties whose information was available during the search. Although the search was not conducted in that party place, but information was there available. So what I want to say here is 153A, 7 years mandatory was to be reopened under the earlier provisions. Whereas under 153C, every year, the assessing officer has to arrive at a satisfaction note every year that yes, this is the reason why there is some satisfaction that reopening should be done for all of the 7 years. So for 153C cases, reassessment was not automatic. That is what I'm explaining out here. However, now that 153A and 153C are no more prevalent, they are no more in existence, you will have to go back to section 148, and section 148 does not have any provisions of satisfaction note. So what I'm coming to the point is that means that if your information is available at the search premises, There will be no satisfaction note. There will be no information recorded because it is an exempted category, and straight away there will be assessment. So this is enlarging the scope as compared to vis-a-vis the earlier law. There are two recent decisions on 148 AD, which I should cover it up here, wherein one is recently dated 11th May and one is 12th May, Delhi High Court and Guwahati High Court. In both the cases, the assessee had challenged the order which was passed under 148D. In both the cases, the order has been quashed by the High Court authorities, and they have said that the order which you are passing has to be an objective order. You don't have, as I earlier mentioned, they are just doing this as a custom. They are just doing it in a cursory manner with a preconceived mind that humko reopen to karna hi hai. So they are not objectively looking into the replies. That is exactly what happened before the Delhi High Court. The assessee had filed 2 replies. The assessing officer replied in 1 page or a half-page order that we are not satisfied with whatever the assessee has submitted, and that is why reopening has to be confirmed, and we consider it as a fit case to reopen. Delhi High Court came heavily on the assessing officer. They struck aside the notice, the order, and they told that you have to pass an objective order. Now, one thing one has to consider is that when in both the decisions, they did not quash the assessment. They just quashed the order. So they've sent it back to the AO and told that you look into what the assessee has given, you look into the reply, and then you give the order. You can't give a summary order. Interestingly, another thing which Delhi High Court has provided, I think I've written that somewhere, that what was the amount which was involved. Think the amount which was the returned income of that particular assessee, Divya Capital 1 Private Limited, the returned income was 3 crores, an odd amount, and the amount which was added as per the escapement income. This is relevant when I was talking about the computation of 50 lakhs or how it is to be computed. The amount which was computed at escape was 1 lakh crores. That was the amount, as compared to 3 crores of returned income, because here again, the company was into capital markets and derivative trading, and their entire turnover was considered as escapement of income. And the judgment comes heavily down on that too, that the assessing officer has to find out that what is the escapement of income amount out of this. This is one such after effects of having a replacement of reasons to believe with information, I feel, because what is the magnanimity of the situation? 1 lakh crores is as compared to 3 crores of income is certainly very maddening. But that is I think, what is going to happen. So yes, one can refer to these 2 judgments, you can refer it, even if you don't want to go to High Court, you can refer in the submissions also made after the order has been received. Even if you don't want to challenge, you can still write it before the assessing authorities. So that you can do. What is information? Although information has been given, again, I don't want to discuss too much because of lack of time, and I want to give that. I see there are many questions in the window, but this is again a food for thought, which I'm, leaving everyone with to deliberate upon. That do you take whatever information which is given in the act by its word, or can you supply more meaning to the word information? See, in various places in the Income Tax Act, whenever they define something, either they write the words information is meant by, or it may write information means and includes. So whenever they write includes, it's an inclusive definition. When they don't write, it is an exhaustive definition. So when there is an exhaustive definition, because there is no use of word includes in the information explanation, so does it mean that whatever 4 or 5 things they have provided, is that it? Can that only be information, or you can supply a further meaning to that? There are various Supreme Court decisions. There were 3 Supreme Court decisions which I have quoted here, which have dealt exhaustively in the terminology of information. So since whatever has been explained So this is all food for thought when you go litigate further in future, down the line, another 2-3 years on the definition of information. You can use some of these Supreme Court decisions to deliberate upon that how can it be information, because right now what they're doing is every ref right center information which they are receiving on Insight portal, they are considering that as information and they are reopening. But actually, is it information? Just because the section says that information as per risk management strategy, that risk management strategy which is never explained, which is never given in the public forum, can that be information? Can you challenge that? Yes, you can. Definitely you can. And that is why I've given you the Supreme Court rulings. You can do your study, read this decision, see how it applies to the facts of your case, and apply to it at a later stage. You can apply it at the assessment stage too. What is vague information cannot be made basis of reopening. This is under the old law, because at that time also there was requirement, although there was reasons, there was requirement of some tangible information. So there, this Delhi High Court decision has beautifully discussed what is information. There are many cases on this. I've just given few of that vague information. Just because, as I mentioned, you know, two things are very relevant. One is information, one is escapement, and both should be joining hands. If both of them are not joining hands, there cannot be reopening. So that is one thing which one has to always contest, that if there is information, one assessing officer has a duty to prove that there is escapement. Because of that information, there has to be application of mind. Even though there is no requirement of reasons to be recorded, there definitely has to be application of mind on the information. Every information is not an information according to section 147. That is what we have to explain the assessing authorities. Section also says information which suggests escapement. Now, what do you mean by suggest? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. It is subjective terminology. It gives discretion to the AO. Simply, it gives discretion to the AO. So, yes. And one very important element which I thought I will discuss or put forth. It's again just a thought, just an issue, that when they refer to books of accounts, when they talk about entries in books of account, when they talk about document or evidence, does it mean regular books of account? Does it mean a regular entry in your books of account which is audited by a statutory auditor? If you ask me, I think the answer is no. Because if the purpose was to analyze each and every audited entry of my books of account, even if it is not audited, if it is my books of account which was there in my ITR, which was given to you, which was given to the assessing authorities, which was placed before them, either there was a regular assessment and it was given, or it was an accepted return under 143(1). But it was something which was available to you before. It's not something which you have found later on. Then in that case, based on that, can you reopen for 10 years? Because everything is going to be there in my books of account. There can be so many entries. So if one has to go by the principle of section 148 and the purpose which the finance minister has propelled, I think then it has to be the books of account which are additionally supplied. Those books of account which were not there before the income tax authority or while filing the return of income. Those entries which are fictitious, those evidences which suggest that there is something bogus, there is something fake, or there is something which has been hidden. Only for those exceptional cases, they should do reopening. And they should not do it for, now this is my wish list. I don't know what they will do, but I'm just telling that one can probably try to challenge that what is entries and what is evidences and what is event and transactions. Too many wordings which we don't have definition for. This is the Cbd instruction, which is the only piece of information which I found, which is somewhere related to risk management strategy. This is an instruction to the income tax authorities which says that what you have to update and what you have to upload as an information on the Insight portal for implementation of this so-called strategy which is not known. So this instruction applicable to all jurisdictional AOs. These directions were given. Now this notice is dated 10 December 21, right? So here also they have given directions for the information only from 15/16 to 18/19. Mark the wordings here 15/16. So this was before the Supreme Court ruling, and that time also they knew that 13/14 and 14/15 they cannot reopen. This is one more thing which fortifies the view which I have taken, that 13/14, 14/15 they cannot reopen, because even the instruction says that you have to give information only from 15/16 to 18/19. Information from any government agency, law enforcement agency, any internal audit objection, any information. Now this is critical. Second last point. Information received from any income tax authority, including the assessing officer. Any income tax authority is such a wide term. And what information? Any information. I don't know what is this instruction, but this is the instruction which is given to all the authorities of what they have to upload on the inside portal from which we are receiving the notices. You can refer the instruction, but I think most relevant points I have already reproduced here. This all is also there. Information arising out of court order. Then, if it is a recurring issue. Now see the the hilarious part of this instruction. Cases involving addition in any assessment year on a recurring issue of law or fact. So that means if it is a recurring issue, you issue notice. Whether it is probable information, whether there is any escapement to this information, no. That is not relevant. What is relevant, if it is a recurring issue, they've given monetary limits 25 lakhs, 10 lakhs, metro wise, that also. If it is metros, then 25, non-metro 10 lakhs, and then you upload that information. This is a very biased instruction, and that is the reason of receiving all haywire notices which we are receiving. So you may read this. This is just for information. Checklist of conducting. I think I have covered this earlier in my presentation. This is just, what you have to do when you get a reassessment notices. Check an assessment year, check the time limit, check the approval, check the signature, DIN number. This is very basic, very technical grounds can be taken, but sometimes, we have seen that because of technical grounds, you win the appeal. So check the amount of escaped income, then whether 7 days is fulfilled, whether 30 days is fulfilled, whether the order has been passed correctly, whether prior approval is there, sanction is whether objective or it is just one word sanction. So all those things I have written here, which one can, refer to. Nothing more I think I can supply here. Just I think one thing, whenever you are receiving any information, and in that information, if they are relying on some other information, okay, if they are telling that this is this information which we have received from some search and seizure proceedings of some party which has been confirmed as a penny stock party, something like that, or which has accepted in the search that they have been dealing with accommodation entries. This is very classic examples. If they are doing that, and if they are finding your assessee name in the list of that particular entity, and if they are telling that the person has given a statement naming the assessee or giving some information, please ask for that information. At the assessment stage, ask for the cross-examination of that party at the stage of 148A itself, not later on. At the 148A itself, if they don't give you, then that Guwahati judgment which I had referred, that was regarding this, that they had asked information, however, assessing officer did not supply. It is your right. Right to cross-examination is an inherent right of every assessee. However, every right has to be exercised. If you don't exercise your right, then the right is lost. At the CIT appeal stage, you cannot take a plea that I was not given opportunity for cross-examination, because you were always given that. You just have to exercise that opportunity. So this is just one thing which I thought. Drafting is something which I think I'll not get into. If time permits, after the questions, probably I'll take it, but it's more of a reading material. These are all the landmark decisions which still hold good, according to me. When objections are not dealt properly, we have Supreme Court, Bombay High Court rulings. Mostly I've restricted to Bombay High Court because I was referring to a Bombay audience, but there are various other high courts too. When the sanction not given objectively, when reopening is barred by limitation, then when inadequate opportunity has been given. What do you mean by month? So there is a High Court decision which says that month means calendar month. It doesn't mean 30 days or 31 days. It means calendar month. What is escapement of income? We have this recent Bombay High Court decision saying that what is escapement, So what is an opinion of internal audit party? We have decisions on that also. Change of opinion. So very famous judgment of Kelvinator Supreme Court judgment. I think the decision also falls good here also. If there is a change of opinion of already concluded assessment, you can definitely use Supreme Court even if the law has been changed. So yeah, these are some of the decisions which I thought which will help. Yes, thank you so much. And we can take questions.
Lalit, can you carry on with the questions?
Yes,
I can. Just you'll ask questions, or should I read
Lalit
it out?
will ask.
You are you comfortable with that if I ask you?
I can read anything is fine. Anything is fine.
So a couple of them are already covered in your presentation, but I'll still read out for you.
Sure.
It's like if the reply has been given to the notice under section 148A and the AO does not accept, then what is the option available?
You have to, if the AO does not accept, that means that in the disposal order or in the order, and I presume that it would be that order which he's speaking of, then I think the option is just, as I mentioned, one thing, either you go to High Court or you again write that you have not considered I think the idea or the key, if you're going, because not everyone can afford to go to High Court. So when you are going at the assessing stage, every recording is relevant. So you might just write that, these things are not considered. My replies were not considered while passing the order, and the order is not objective, and we protest. However, without prejudice, you have to submit the details, because if you decide completely, there are cases, very strong cases where we know that strong legal cases but weak factual cases. So when you know that the facts are not too good, facts are weak, and the only way in which you are going to win this appeal is only on base of law. In those cases, once or twice in the past, we have tried to not give anything on the basis of merits. We have kept on objecting till the end. And since they didn't have anything factual, the order was also only on the legal part. They said that we don't accept. And at the CIT appeal stage, also we didn't submit anything. At the ITAT, we got relief only based on the legal ground. But that we do not, I don't recommend it in every case. It's just when your facts are very weak and you just want to take a legal debate. Apart from that, the only option is just to express your discontent and move forward.
So practically here, my question is, once a 148AD order is passed, immediately they issue 148, they open 148.
They have to wait. They wait for some time period and they can then issue you 148.
So how to file this objection? I mean, it has to be physical thing then, or by email or something like that? Because 148AD's order is received. Yes. After that 148, there is only option to submit your return. That's it.
I know. So see, unfortunately, you don't have any remedy, but in last 1-2 months, since you know the officer, we have tried to go to the officer and we have submitted and met the assessing officer that you please drop at this stage too. Some of the officers have accepted our letter, so they've given a stamp acknowledgement. And they've told that, whenever you have this reply, but we are going to go ahead with the reopening. So they told us on our face that we are going to do, because we have already taken the sanction and we are going to issue notice under 148. But since you are submitting, we are taking it on record. So that is something you can do because you know the jurisdictional officer. But some officers have also refused. They say that, no, whatever you want to file, you file online. But you don't have that time period because they close that proceedings. Technically, they close the tab. Once the order has been received. So you can't file. So what we do is then, when you receive the 148 notice, you have to file the return. After you file the return, you will get 2 notices, 143-2 and 142-1. Against reply of 142.1, our first reply, we will make two separate replies. The first reply is objecting the order and objecting the notice. And the second reply will be a without prejudice reply on the merits.
Next question is notice under 148A received for furnishing return under section 148. Now, along with the income tax return,
can you tell me who the name of the person? So I'll read.
Vijay Kumar JM. Vijay Kumar JM.
Okay, fine. Notice under section 148 received for furnishing the return under section 148. Now, along with the income tax return, whether we have to furnish other documents, etc. Example, sale of immovable property. Right now, if you feel, see, now when you are receiving the notice under 148A and you want to convince them that, that 148 should not happen, because 148A is basically that only, that you have to convince that you don't. So rather than only disputing on the legal ground, if you want to furnish the information to say that, see, I'm also giving information, you take it at this stage itself and say, convince yourself that there is no reopening or there is nothing which is escaped. So that that information can be supplied at 148 stage. It's not that you have to reply only on the legal grounds. If there is some information which you feel that is going to help in dropping the assessment, you have to provide. You can provide, I mean. So
next question is order passed under 148A in routine manner without considering reply submitted. Now this is a common problem everyone is facing.
Same problem. It's very, in fact, Delhi High Court decision, they have, you would not believe, so everyone should read that decision. I could not get the citation, but I've given the name. They have interestingly written 5 lines reproduced under 148A order, and they say these are stereotypical lines which are received in all the orders. And it is true, all the orders, there is one format. They just apply that format, change the amounts, and they send it. This itself shows that how illogically they are dealing with the replies which we are making with so much efforts. Yes. So should I read the next one?
Yeah, so next is about the EY 1718, the one of the slide where you explain which year what is applicable.
See, 1718, it is 3 years from the end of the relevant assessment year. I think I've explained, but I'll just again say 1718, 31st March 2018. It is 3 years from 31st March 18. If you calculate, it is 31st March 21. Okay, so 3 years are ending as per the new law. Now, if you ask me, if it is less than 50 lakhs, then 1718 cannot be reopened. If you literally go by the wordings of the section, which is very simple. But if it is more than 50 lakhs, then 1718 will survive. However, this is in contradiction to the CBDT instruction. I'll have to clarify that, because CBDT instruction clearly says 1718 notice is going to come. So yeah. What is TOLA? Someone has asked. Sorry. Yeah. So I need to mention that. So TOLA is basically, I forgot the entire name. It is Taxation of Relaxation and Amendment Act 2020. It is just an acronym. I have written the date also of that act, but it is being just referred to like that, just for simplicity's sake. Yes, Lalit, you can take any question which you feel relevant.
So next is a longer one. What if the AO is not following provisions mentioned in 148A? Then can the assessee object to 148A order during 148 proceedings? For example, AO has not considered the submission made by assessee in response to 148A notice. Can we raise objection under 148? I think this is covered.
I have covered already.
Yes, you already answered.
But this is correct. 148A is not an appealable order. I think I forgot to mention that. But you can't appeal as against the 148A order. And that's correct fact. But you don't have any option. Either you go High Court or you just protest in words.
Kinjal, what is the best time to go to the High Court? Either after receiving the order of 148A or after filing of the return?
No, I would say none of them after receiving notice of 148, but before filing the return.
But
because then you challenge both. You when you are challenging the notice under 148, there is no bar which says that you cannot challenge the order.
Yes.
So when the Delhi High Court decision, which I was referring to, and even the Guwahati High Court, they have objected the 148 notice, the 148A-D order, and even the 148B show cause notice. They have challenged everything, but that is when you do it at a later stage. Yeah.
But in one of the cases, I have read that 148 when we have directly go to the High Court after before filing of the return, then the High Court straight away reject the case or scratch the case and state that you have other remedy, please follow that remedy, then after come to us.
But that is, see, unfortunately, that has happened.
That is the point of generally the court take. But if you have the other remedy, first follow that and then you come to us.
Correct. So that is there. But now, you know, I think, again, cannot challenge the wisdom of high courts. But with due respect, we are receiving such kind of, you know, hysterical judgments. And unfortunately, it's not correct, because that is the stage which you can challenge. How can you challenge after filing return? Because once you file return, even if you're protesting, you are still accepting, because you're proceeding with the assessment. So I think it's unfortunate that we are receiving such judgments, but majority, I think this should happen.
But we have a chance that after filing of the return, we can again challenge the notice, the order.
You can challenge, you can go before the High Court at any stage of assessment proceedings. There is no bar. But there has to be some misuse of jurisdictional right. You have to fulfill the article of the Constitution which allows you to move to the High Court. That's the only thing which you will have to see. So obviously an advocate would be a correct person to specify as what timings and what regards you can move to the High Court. But you can, there is no bar which says that after filing the return, you can't go to the High Court.
So the next question is, if no new notice is received for AY 1314 and 1415, whether any closure order will be received, that assessment is closed, or it is to be believed that assessment is closed?
So I didn't get time, but I think since we've received the question, no, I'll answer this. Just yesterday, we received a notice for assessment year 1314 from assessing officer. We received 2 notices which supplied us information and told us that you reply within 2 weeks to proceed the reassessment. Now, this is in contrary to what has happened and what I told. But I think, and surprisingly, the CBD instruction has told that we will give a separate instruction for those years and no new notices will be issued. Even after that, the only catch here is that in our case, it was more than 50 lakhs. And the CBD instruction says that no notice will be issued if it is less than 50 lakhs. So they have followed the instruction, but they have not waited for CBD to pass any separate instruction. So now what am I doing to that is that I'm legally challenging the notice. I am making, that is the course of action which we have decided that we practically, that we are going to not give any merits or supply any facts. We are going to refer to the Supreme Court ruling and say that this is an illegal notice and we are not going to comply with it. And I'm sure that they are not going to listen. They will pass an order. And as soon as they pass order and they issue a notice, we are ready to file a writ petition before High Court. So we have decided what we have to do. But I think if there is any instruction which comes now after the CBDT instruction number 1, there should be some closure. I think order will not be received. But what might be received is a letter which says that the reassessment has been dropped, because they can't give an order in case if it is not valid notice. So that is how it is going to be dealt.
So I'll be taking your opinion, because I've received a similar notice today from in one of the clients' cases.
Correct. Yeah, they have started issuing. Oh no.
Yes. It is for AY 1314.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. If no information provided in reply to show cause notice, And 148 order issued since information based on which show cause notice.
Sorry, which question you are reading? Pranavsha. Okay.
Pranavsha.
Okay. If no information provided in reply to show cause notice, and 148 order issued since information based on which show cause notice seems to be no base. Oh, this is a typical case wherein no information is provided. I was just wondering that without information, what they would have written in the notice. And this is a very typical case. Now you just have to challenge. What is? That is the only answer here. If there is no information, it is a best case, very good case to drop the proceedings. Yeah.
Next is Rimasha's case. When we object after receiving 148, then will the officer have to dispose of the objections, just like in old regime? No. Now that will not apply, because that old regime has been brought about in 148A. So now once they are 148 subclause D is nothing but disposal. So once they are disposing that, they will not do that again after issuance of notice under 148. You are just exercising your right when you are objecting. That is it. But they will go ahead and they will issue notice under 142(1) and ask you details. Okay, there are a couple of more questions, but these are already covered by earlier questions or your presentation.
Okay, so, yes. I'm just saying that if there is anything new.
One small question.
Yes.
It would be whose responsibility to prove that the information is correct or wrong? Either it is the responsibility of AO or the SSE.
Ideally, it has to be the responsibility of the AO, because the information is given by the AO. So the first onus, if you ask me, is on the AO. But to challenge that, it is not. But what will AO say? AO will say that according to me. See, what has happened is that AO will say that information is defined under the explanation. And under the definition, it is said that whatever information as per the inside portal or whatever information which is available as per risk management strategy. So when one asks that you have to prove that this is information, they will say that I have done everything as per the law. So now the question is, now it goes into the court of the assessee to prove that this is not information. So I think,
like in case of Arvind has raised the question that in few cases the amount are reflecting twice or thrice, and because of this, the amount is exceeding 50 lakh.
In fact, I would like to supply one thing here, which I forgot at the sanction level. There are various cases which one should refer for sanction 151. So in such cases, where there are especially stamp duty, the property 5 crore property 3 times reflected becomes 15 crores. So now when that is happening, and the sanction has been received, one can not only challenge the notice of non-application of mine by the assessing officer, but one can also challenge non-application of mine by the sanctioning authority. Because had the sanctioning authority applied his mine, then that mistake would have been not happened before giving that information. So you challenge that, and you challenge, because why 151 challenging is more important, because that is a higher authority. There are principal chief commissioner which they have given. So when you challenge the principal chief commissioner of income tax, that holds a lot of value at the later stage of appellate.
And we have also seen that the property is in the joint name, and the total amount is 50 or 60 lakhs.
First name, second name, they take everything and
everything, and they are issuing notice to everyone.
Yes, I've seen that. But I'm telling that is all because of that meaningless Cbd instruction which I have put down at the end. That instruction itself doesn't have any legs to stand. So it's all because of that.
That's it from the questions answer session.
Right. So thanks KINJAL thanks Lalit, and thanks KINJAL for a detailed presentation, and congratulations for your stamina for non-stop talking for 3 hours plus. And
thank you. I hope it's not boring.
No. Okay. Also, before the start of the webinar, you said there might be more confusions, but I think members will agree that most of their confusions has been cleared. So now I request my friend and past convener Lalit to present a well-deserved vote of thanks to you.
Before I give the vote of thanks, I mean, everyone as a participant have appreciated your continuous speaking of 3 hours at the same energy level. And that's really appreciated. And one of the compliment given in chat box by one of the participants, that very excellent articulation and presentation. Proud to be the participant today. So before I give my vote of thanks, yes. So all the participants will agree that KINJAL had dealt with a subject in very detailed manner. She compared the old and new law regime, analyzed the FX court judgment, discussed the instructions from CBDT, and also given the explanations on various terms used in the matter. She also discussed some of the case laws and, more importantly, number of issues on reassessment. KINJAL Madam, thank you very much for your time and to the point PPT and presentation. We at Borivali Central CP Study Circle give you hearty vote of thanks. Thank you so much for your precious time.
Thank you so much to, in fact, the organizers and everyone who was present. I could see the participant list was more or less constant, and on a Saturday evening to give 3 hours to a monologue, listening to me on a webinar is, I think that itself is also a feat. So I thank everyone who is present here and was patiently listening to me.
So thanks to you for that, because we have never hardly see that 250 people are sitting at this time once the session is over, and that too of 3 hours. So credit goes to your lecture. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot once again, KINJAL.